bills that have been verified and authenticated by the pending bills multi-agency team. This comes as a relief to suppliers who have not been paid for years since megagraft scandals rocked the institution. Payments to suppliers owed close to 14 billion shillings were stopped in 2015 following the NYS scandals in which nearly 2 billion shillings was lost through fictitious procurement. Now, Mani National Congress Party leader Musalia Mudavadi now claims that yesterday's cabinet meeting, summoned and chaired by President Uhuru Kenyatta, was a political target for Deputy President William Ruto. Mudavadi argues that the meeting was meant to ensure that the DP, who has long been at loggerheads with his boss, missed attendance so that he could be accused of skipping government functions. As he hailed Ruto's decision to attend the said meeting, Mudavadi said Ruto's move was counter-effective to his political rivals, whom he said were planning to taint his name in bad light for allegedly not delivering on his duties. The ANC leader similarly accused the state of trying to dupe Kenyans after the Kenya Kwanza Brigade previously raised concerns that no cabinet meeting had been held in more than a year. And the Central Organization of Trade Unions Secretary General Francis Atwoli has spoken out against the Kenya Kwanza coalition over a recently leaked power sharing deal. Atwoli told of the coalition's presidential flag bearer, Deputy President William Ruto, terming the post-election agreement as blatant deceit to his core principles. According to the court boss, the DP has allotted what it termed as unrealistic demands to his fellow Kenya Kwanza leaders, while also giving inferior promises of positions if he ascends to the highest office in the land. At the same time, Atwoli recalled DP Ruto's past criticisms of the Building Bridges initiative, where Ruto accused the proponents of leading selfish politics of sharing positions rather than focusing on the needs of Kenyans. In the same light, Atwoli outrightly asserted that Ruto is currently playing double standards by creating positions that he once vouched against. This year's Madaraka Day celebrations will be held at Uhuru Gardens, Nairobi County. While inspecting the preparations, Interior PS Karanja Kibisha said that the celebrations will be held in Uhuru Gardens in appreciation of the significance of this particular event. Kibisha revealed that the preparations were almost complete, adding that as a committee, they were satisfied to give Kenyans a colorful celebrations. According to Kibisha, the National Celebrations Committee is also considering allowing counties to host gatherings alongside the national event. And a Mombasa magistrate has warmed the hearts of many Kenyans after he ordered for a mini harambe for a couple that had been charged with stealing a bale of wheat flour. The couple, a middle-aged woman, was charged alongside her husband with stealing contrary to Section 26(1) as read with Section 275 of the Penal Code. Principal Magistrate Vincent Adet in his ruling, however, sympathized with them on ground that the poor couple stole so as to provide for their children. And the last major fugitive wanted for his role in the 1994 Rwandan genocide, Protas Mpiranya, died in Zimbabwe in 2006. Charged with genocide, war crimes and crimes against humanity, Mpiranya commanded Rwanda's Presidential Guard, a feared outfit accused of targeting assassinations during the 100-day massacre of Tutsis and moderate Hutus. UN prosecutors had spent more than 2 decades hunting him following his indictment by the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda in 2000, but in fact, he had died of tuberculosis nearly 16 years ago. A Tibet Airlines plane caught fire after skidding off the runway in the southwestern Chinese city of Chongqing. All 113 passengers and 9 crew members were evacuated safely. More than 40 passengers with minor injuries were taken to hospital, according to a statement from the Chongqing Jiangbei International Airport. The Civil Aviation Administration of China said that 6 people suffered bruises and sprains during the evacuation. And North Korea confirmed its first ever COVID-19 cases and declared a serious emergency, with the leader Kim Jong-un appearing in a mask on television for the first time to order nationwide lockdowns. Hours after the shock announcement, the first time the nuclear-armed country has admitted to having COVID cases, Seoul's military said it had detected 3 short-range ballistic missiles fired near Pyongyang. The launch, one of more than a dozen sanctions-busting weapons tests so far this year, comes shortly after Washington warned that Kim's regime could test a nuke any day, with satellite images indicating fresh activity at nuclear sites. This is Newswire. I'm Dennis Aseto. Good morning.
SpiceFM, Nyeri.
The following takes place from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. every weekday on SpiceFM.
I like listening to you guys. You're the default radio station in my car in the morning. Even the children listen to you guys.
I agree Parliament has failed this country. And I will say it again. We have not done what we should have done.
We know in this country, the Kenya prison sector is one of the most underfunded sector.
The way it is being done and the way we're calling it Huduma Number the Msema Kweli is because all records will be there. You know, there are people who are now billionaires with no history as to how they got all these assets.
Yes. Anything that the president does that is not in accord with the constitution is an illegal act. You know, he shouldn't be doing it and should be sitting here and trying to sort of guise it up.
I totally believe live transmission of results and allowing Kenyans to be able to view all these results. I believe that it will be impossible.
End of the week, and what are we looking at this morning in terms of traffic? Not too much on most of our roads today. Coming off of Mombasa Road, looks pretty good actually. Southern Bypass, free and clear for you to use this morning. There's an option for you. Let's look into industrial area, which usually has a lot of traffic at this time. It's Jogo Road that's thumping right now, getting out towards the City Stadium roundabout, and then through to Landis out towards Kamkunji. On Uhuru Highway, you shouldn't have much of an issue as you're getting into the city, and then out towards Westlands, you should be just fine. On the thicker superhighways where we have a bit of action here and there, traffic is starting to pile up, especially around the Pangani underpass, but it's still slim pickings. So wait and see what happens through the morning. Talk to us, SpiceFM KE on Twitter. Text 40127.
.9 Spice FM, Mombasa. This is the Situation Room, the home of hard-hitting political commentary and penetrating insights about the state of the nation. This is a talk radio experience like no other. The Situation Room, a place for hard truths, debates, and elevated conversations. The Situation Room, witty, political, engaging, deep, controversial. In the room, we have C.T. Muga, researcher, academic, seasoned political observer, a fountain of wisdom in these politically uncertain times. Ndu Okoh, Nigerian by birth, Kenyan by choice, communications expert, Pan-Africanist, a truth seeker and believer in people power, and Eric Latiff, agent provocateur, the man in the chair, seasoned journalist, news hound, a man who believes in punching up, not down.
9 after 6.
This
Good
is
morning.
the
How are you
Situation Room,
doing? Welcome
the
to
only
Friday.
way to start
it's Friday the 13th. 10. Yes, Ndu?
I never made you out to be a suspicious man.
Hmm?
Superstitious man, rather.
No, so you are here.
No,
I'm doing this for you.
What are you doing for me exactly? Let's just be clear.
You said Friday the 13th.
Yes.
I came with my black cat.
It's in that jacket, no less.
It's in my bag.
Siti peleka pesa kwa bank, please.
Please. You're giving us pressure.
You're walking around with all your money.
I want to see
On
my
a
money.
daily basis.
Whose money
It's
is
like
it?
your friend
Huh?
Nkajado.
Whose money is it?
It's yours.
Then
Take it to the bank. It's safe.
it's not my bank.
Hey. Unabeba tu pesa kwa jacket kila siku.
Yes.
Okay. It's a weekend.
I was a Boy Scout in my youth. Be prepared.
Be prepared. Always be ready. You're well, though?
I am actually very well. It's just that when it gets to Friday, your body tells you it's Friday.
It reminds you
Yes, because you're tired.
of where you've been.
You're tired. And yet you slept well. Slept many hours.
How
Woke
many
up
hours do you
How
sleep?
many hours do you sleep, CT? Because also we can define what many is.
more than 5.
Collectively over the week.
What sort of nighttime activities are you on?
Yes.
More than 5. Do you want me to be specific? Okay. Slightly more than 5.
Okay.
Yes.
That's better.
Yes.
We have a guest host today, and he's a journalist, Ramanyang. welcome to Kenya's biggest conversation.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
The last time we had you was virtually, and we had a conversation with you. And we've been planning this for a while.
Yeah.
So here it is. Hayawi.
Hayawi hua.
Yeah. So what do you do now? You left the Standard Group very many years ago.
12 years ago.
12 years ago.
12 years ago. Last time I was here, this studio wasn't finished. The radio operation was literally just on spreadsheets and business plans. So it's good to see progress.
So what have you been up to?
Well, let's see. Left the Standard Group, spent another 2 years in local media. Then since 2012, I've been working with the Chinese state broadcaster. It is the China Global Television Network. That's what CGTN stands for. And occasionally finding a few bylines here and there. So writing for Bloomberg as well. Just looking for who has money, who's using money, who's providing money, and what that says about the distribution of power in our societies.
CT will be in the next article. Who has money? CT.
Where is the money?
CT.
Here.
But is it crypto or is it fiat money?
He has the jacket.
Okay.
He walks with his money.
Crypto, Bitcoin, a little bit more coin.
NFT.
Yes.
All of the above coins.
You have all the money. Nataka gani?
Oh, your portfolio on crypto must be looking terrible right now because Bitcoin crashed this entire week.
It's okay.
You're going to hold.
There's a time it didn't even exist.
So it's all right.
That is stoicism right there. That's being stoic.
Welcome to the conversation, Rama. We'll be looking at various things. The state of the Kenyan economy. Who has money? Where is our money? Who do we owe money? How do we pay them? Where are we going to get the money to pay them? Those are some of the conversations we'll be having today.
But how are you?
Me?
You can just be rapping here and you're not all right. Are you okay?
I don't know, by the way.
You see? You see now?
And how are you?
Me? I'm fine.
Rama, how are you?
I am surviving.
We didn't even ask. We just assume everybody's all right.
Me, I didn't assume he's all right. I know Eric is not all right.
And so?
Okay. Now that everybody is there.
Yes.
Kila mtu ako at least.
Two
statements that only make sense in Kenya.
Yes.
For real.
Well, at 7 o'clock, let's have a conversation on what's happening in the country and also try to look at drawing parallels with what's happening elsewhere in the world. But let's take a closer look at what's happening in Sri Lanka. We looked at it yesterday in the newspaper review. A lot of progress has taken place in terms of the downward trend that Sri Lanka is taking. Now there's a new prime minister after the former prime minister resigned and went into hiding in an army base. A new prime minister coming in and saying, we are going to try and see how we can resolve issues, is from the opposition. The president, people want the president gone.
Yes.
President and your family, go away. But how's it going to pan out? So we'll be having a guest to talk to us about that. And this is a man we've had before. Elijah Munye is an adjunct professor at USIU. He also is a researcher on China, one of the places where Sri Lanka has borrowed heavily from. We'll be talking about the lessons from Sri Lanka when it comes to national debt. And then at 8 o'clock, the National Assembly should be discussing the Finance Bill 2022 and how the government intends to finance the next budget. Proposals were taken to Parliament. The Parliamentary Committee on Budget and Appropriation is supposed to be discussing this and taking it to the full House. And then they discuss it. What is it that we should be demanding that our MPs save us from? That's a conversation we'll have at 8 o'clock. And we'll be joined by Nikhil Hira. Nikhil is currently a partner at Kodi Africa. But he's been on these streets for quite a while, right?
Yeah, he definitely has. Ex-Deloitte. If there's someone who has institutional memory around how tax policy in this country, tax and spending policy, because that's both sides of the scale, has evolved over the last 20, 30 years, it's Nikhil Hira.
He'll be with us at 8. At 9 o'clock, we'll start preparing ourselves for the launch of the expressway and what it means.
My God.
It's tomorrow where people will be allowed onto the expressway to start paying. How much are we supposed to be paying? So the budget has risen already to what? 88 billion shillings out from the initial figures of around 67 billion. Can you imagine? When the dollar rises by a shilling, it goes up. And this is how it's going to be for the next 27 years, if we are lucky, if it doesn't go to 50 years. Keep it here for that. So quickly, let's take a look at our progress in combating COVID.
All right, let's look at Kenya. 18 new cases from a sample size of 2,990. So that gives us a positivity rate of 0.6%. We saw just the other day, actually not the other day, just yesterday actually, the news of AMREF CEO, our friend Dr. Githinji, who has now been made a board chairman of Global Vaccines Organization. So it would be interesting to see, because we're having conversations about vaccines being produced on the continent, South Africa, of course, with this little problem of buy from us so that we can supply to the least and lower middle income countries. Kenya's plant then, which will be established, in the course of this year. So those are conversations that are happening while the United States has passed 1 million COVID deaths. 1 million people in the US have died from COVID. President Joe Biden said the country was marking a tragic milestone, and each death was an irreplaceable loss. It's the highest official total in the world, although the World Health Organization believes the true death toll will be much higher. When we look at numbers from World Meters, we are told that the death toll from COVID is 6.2 million. A sixth of those have come out of the US, but the World Health Organization tells us that it's very possible that these deaths are as high as 15 million globally, whereas global numbers are currently looking at 519,779,455. North Korea reports its first COVID death, and the adjectives used to describe this are very interesting. But there's now been a nationwide lockdown. Kim Jong-un says, lockdown, tackle this virus after the subvariant has been detected in Pyongyang. So they're calling it the first outbreak. It's being called vicious. It's raising fears of a humanitarian disaster in one of the world's few unvaccinated countries as it goes into nationwide lockdown. Subvariant of the highly transmissible Omicron variant in Pyongyang, according to the state agency yesterday, without elaborating on the number of confirmed cases. But they said, the whole country locked down until further notice.
What kind of lockdown? Shanghai
A
kind of
complete
lockdown?
Shanghai kind of lockdown.
Wow.
This is where the problem lies, because can they have a lockdown, mirroring that of Shanghai, but then also providing for the people in the manner in which the Chinese government has done, providing food and medicine at your doorstep? Can they do that? Which is why already humanitarian crisis, words like this are already popping up. Because
who's talking about humanitarian crisis?
Well, come on. Who's reporting the
The
story?
other people.
Who's reporting the story?
Remember the question that was raised yesterday by the CEO of the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission.
Yeah.
He was in a meeting, he said, and he was talking to somebody from Transparency International. They came up with data from Northern Korea. And he asked a simple question. That is a country that, tongue-in-cheek, has been on lockdown, meaning it's a closed community. So how then do you get all these figures and stats that you... Who provides you with this data? Where do you get it from?
That Korea is corrupt or not?
Yes. That everything that we're saying here, I'm not saying it isn't true, but I would very much like to know the source. How do you get this information?
North Korea is one of those societies that's notoriously difficult to get any information out of. So it's a valid question.
They'll tell you what they want you to know.
And they will limit what you can do on their territory to a really large extent.
Yes, so even as we hear this story, I'm asking the same question.
Yeah, humanitarian crisis.
And Eric's question is valid. Who is telling the story?
Anyway, 6:20, let's take a quick break, take a look at the weather, and then we will be saying hello to everybody who's online this lovely Friday morning. It's the 13th day of March, 2022.
SpiceFM.
It's mostly cloudy in Nairobi this morning at 16, highs of 25. Today, clear at 15. In Nakuru, 26 will be the high, lows of 14, or see lows of 13. In Nyeri, where it's mostly clear currently, we'll see highs of 24. 26 will be the high in Eldoret, where it's clear at 12, and that'll be today's low. A clear morning in Mombasa, 25, highs of 31, and we'll see highs of 31 as well in Malindi, where it's clear for a change this week at 26. It's raining in Kisumu, however, at 18, highs of 29, and we'll see highs of 28 in a mostly cloudy Kakamega this morning, currently at 16. Out into Kampala, it's mostly clear at 19, highs of 26, and we'll see highs of 31 in a partly cloudy Dar es Salaam, coming down to lows of 23. Clear conditions in Johannesburg at 13, highs of 22 and lows of 11, while it's raining in Lagos at 26, we'll see highs of 32. Coming into Friday. Look out into Beijing. We're going into afternoon Friday. It's 20 degrees. We'll see highs of 23 and lows of 8. Mostly clear conditions in Paris at 10, highs of 23. 22 will be the high in London, where it's currently clear at 12, coming down to lows of 9. And still Thursday night in New York, it's cloudy at 15. Coming into Friday, we'll see highs of 22 and lows of 15.
Sugar and spice and everything.
Spice up your life. Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4
22 after 6,
Spice
who's
FM,
online?
Nairobi. Joseph says good morning to you, and Andrew Franklin is up. Well done to you. TGIF indeed. Assuming what TGIF stands for. And says good morning to you all this morning. Amos Hissa says good morning as well. Alfred Chiari is tuned in. Patrick Fikirini tuned in from County 001. See, do you know which one that is?
001. Mombasa.
Oh, well done. Robert Mbogo is also tuning from Mombasa. Folonja Mwashumbe, hey, I like that name, says Tukundani. Rosemary Nzuki says good morning. Charles Chalo, isn't it? Says good morning. Kikambala is locked. Let's do this. Indeed, let us. Festus Mulu says good morning. Vincent Ogutu is tuned in as well. Daniel Kanye says tuned in from Kilungu Hills, specifically Kilungu Hills in Makwene County. 87.9, that's the frequency in where Patrick is. Okay, here we go. Otieno Mike says, pass my regards to Wood Muhoroni. Eric
the son of Muhoroni.
Oh, that's what you are. Eric Latiff and Ndu. Nyaruge
says stop ignoring.
No for political hecklers. Good morning, and Walimu Dominic Cheriot. Everybody else, we see you. Good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, everybody. City. Are we still in Rwanda?
No. We left Rwanda.
We're
in Southern Sudan for the last day today. Okay. You cannot feed your donkey only when you need to ride it. Should I repeat it?
Yeah.
Okay. The proverb is from Southern Sudan. You cannot feed your donkey only when you need to ride it.
Okay. When else should you feed it?
All the time. All the time.
Yes. Always feed your donkey.
Do they feed donkeys in South Sudan? In Kenya, they don't feed donkeys.
They're not prepared.
Donkeys just go
feeding themselves.
Feeding a donkey doesn't mean you bring a basket full of food or you bring a tray full of food. You leave it next to pasture. You're feeding it. You've led it to a place where it can eat. You're feeding it.
In Kenya, donkeys are just, you leave the donkey.
Yes.
You are finished with the donkey, leave the donkey.
Yes.
Go look for food. Tuonane baadaye.
Donkeys are capable animals.
Have you ever found like a tethered donkey? Where you find a tethered cow, somewhere lush green.
I had never
by
thought
the
of it, but
roadsides.
now that you mention, I have never seen a tethered donkey.
Imagine.
Never.
You don't feed donkeys.
That's interesting. Never seen a tethered donkey.
No, I've never seen a tethered donkey.
No, you'll see donkeys being whipped.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or that you see a lot of.
That's
You
what
won't see
you
a
see.
tethered donkey.
No. It's very interesting.
And we barely take care of them, strictly speaking.
And yet you
No,
want
in
to
this,
ride the
in, the, in
donkey.
this country, no, we don't. Not really. Yes.
Okay. So the South Sudanese people probably do. Cannot feed a donkey, only when you need to ride it.
Oh, they realize that if you want to get something worth out of something, let's take care of it.
Yeah, take care of your donkey. Okay, let's look at the newspaper headlines. www.standardmedia.co.ke. A member of our online community. Please become one. Just log on, sign up, and you'll have access to premium content. What they're promoting today is this story. Hubby abused me for 17 years, and this is said by a pastor. Spouses confess persevering toxic unions for fear of being stigmatized. So because you are the wife of a pastor, when you go to church, you are mama or kanisa. What you're going through at home, you cannot bring to the congregation. So there's that whole stigmatization. So very many of pastors' spouses just come and put up a front. Go read that story in the papers. What are you looking at? Ndu?
Well, the cabinet did meet, and I think that was a top for a lot of folks yesterday. So on the front page of Standard today, inside the Ruto cabinet meeting, President and his deputy sit down to conduct state business with CSs for the first time in over a year as queries over collective responsibility and retrospective tabling of agenda items before the cabinet crop up. So there were a number of things. A snapshot of cabinet deliberations. 1. The cabinet passes over 100 bills. My goodness, they made quick work of that yesterday. Policies, treaties, and conventions, and considers progress report on implementation of various priority projects. Some cabinet secretaries raised questions over collective responsibility of cabinet, citing those criticizing government and its economic policy. Questions raised over the legality and implication of cabinet ratifying bills retrospectively, some more than a year after they became law, and then considers a statement that noted that in 2021, the economy recovered from effects of COVID-19 and expanded by 7.5% compared to 0.3% in 2020. So there was a bit of a back patting here that went on, saying that, despite everything, seem to have been doing a good job. All right, so I think the main story here was that cabinet met. What they discussed, of course, was important, but that they met after such a long time was what made the news. They yesterday came face to face, the president and his deputy, to face a full cabinet meeting for the first time in over a year to transact government business. Dr. Ruto, who has been on record complaining that his duties have been delegated to Interior Cabinet Minister Fred Matiang'i, yesterday sat to the right of his boss as the team deliberated on a number of issues. The president arrived for the cabinet meeting a few minutes past 10. The meeting, of course, began with prayer and embarked on clearance of bills, including some that had been passed into law, without this deliberation. The meeting is said to have approved over 100 bills, in addition to policies, regulations.
So
and
they are
other
approving a
statutory-
bill that has already been signed into law by the president.
Yes. There was a lot of cleaning up that was happening here. It's already in law, already being practiced, and then we say, okay, well, actually, so how about we deliberate it now and just, brush up on it and then put it aside, tick
the box.
Yeah, exactly.
We did something.
We did something about it. That's what was going on yesterday for a lot. So you can imagine, they did the business yesterday, really just going through the pages. Lick next, tick next.
Okay. Key here is they said, let's continue the price stabilization mechanism for fuel products. The prices have shot up. The money has been depleted. This stabilization story that we are talking about, is it really going to work? Rama. Because if you think about it, already today, all marketing companies are actually still complaining. They still have backlog. They have not been paid for months. They don't have access to the dollar. They are straining on accessing the dollar to import the product.
The fact of the matter is, and there's a whole bunch of specific issues around public finances that came out of yesterday's cabinet meeting, they just did not make sense. So number one, with respect to the fuel stabilization fund, the subsidy, let's just call it what it is. The subsidy that the government says they want to continue with. This is the same subsidy that in the last fiscal year, Treasury took 18 billion shillings, so roughly $180 million out of it, which is roughly 75% of what was in there at the time. Turned around and decided to spend that money on the SGR. Kenya Railways is bleeding money. It's losing something close to 20 billion shillings in the last fiscal year, which is deeply problematic in and of itself. It never showed up here. Because what they'll say is, we discussed the financial status of Kenya Airways, how to essentially right-size Kenya Airways. We discussed how to right-size Kenya Power. Fair enough. Kenya Railways is bleeding a lot more money than any of these other entities. Doesn't get a mention. And yet, we're taking money out of the stabilization fund for fuel prices, for lack of a better word, and then turning around and spending it on completely different things. There's nothing that makes sense here based on what they sent out from the cabinet. Number one. Number two, there's a lot of discussion in cabinet that seems completely disconnected from economic reality. How is it that you're going to essentially start talking about reforming SOEs, and yet you're not willing at the same time to discuss, are we actually going to cut spending?
Rama, what are SOEs?
State-owned enterprises.
Okay, very good.
Parastatus.
The Kenya Railways, the Kenya Airways of this world. They're all SOEs. And the problem here is that last December, the Treasury, when they were actually having this discussion around, we know fuel prices are going to go up, right? And they've gone up by at least 50%. Just this year alone. We're not even talking about 2021. Just this year alone. Crude prices have gone up by 50%. The currency is depreciated by roughly 7% over that period of time. Last December, Treasury said, listen, we're not in a position to give you a 50% cut in VAT, drop it from 8% to 4%. We can't cut the Petroleum Development Fund levy from 5 shillings 40 a litre down to 2.90. Because if we do that, we're going to lose 37 billion shillings in revenue.
Yep.
For context, 37 billion is what? Twice what we're budgeting for the entire judiciary for the next fiscal year. So the sensible thing to do would be to just cut taxes temporarily, make it time bound. Say, you know what, until, say, Brent crude or Moban drops down to, say, 90 or 70 or $80 a barrel, we're going to keep taxes at this level. But Treasury's refused that entire idea. But instead, we're turning around at cabinet level and saying, yeah, let's continue with the subsidy, and yet we're treating that subsidy like a slush fund. Doesn't make sense.
It's money that's just coming in and going into very many other places.
Yeah.
And when it's needed for this particular purpose, it's not there.
Well, that question has now been answered. We had asked it before. Because if money is actually correct, it's deducted at source, and it literally sits there. We know it doesn't. So where does it go?
It's being spent on things that, and in fact, even the Auditor General flagged it, and she said the Energy Ministry, and this was last year, the Energy Ministry, and I'm paraphrasing because I don't remember the exact phrasing here, the Energy Ministry broke the law by taking money out of the Petroleum Development Fund and then spending it on the Nuclear Power Agency, diverting it to the SGR, diverting it to the Rural Electrification Agency, etc. There's a lot of dodgy behavior that's going on with how our money is being used.
It's being spent. Let's take a quick break. Let's see how the roads are looking like. 24 minutes to 7. We will be reminding you about this brand new swanky phone called Samsung A series, A33, A53 and A73. And that in fact, the crucial thing to remember here is that you can trade in this phone, your old phone, and go and get the new Samsung A series.
Your old Samsung phone.
People rocking up with different phones.
Lakini hii mambo ni kuongea.
Hata hii simu ambayo jina yake ni
simu chukua tu hii. Sawa utachukua, lakini si utalipa tu 99% of the price of the
scrap value.
25 to 7.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day. Spice FM. Malindi.
All right, so we're looking at some action happening on the Thika Superhighway today, getting into the city. It's probably going to take a minute to get through that, but right now we're seeing that traffic building up all the way past the Utali Drift survey and beyond. Doesn't look too bad for now. As you get to that Pangani underpass, Muthaiga Square coming in from Kiambu Road, we'll have a bit of a hold up there. Let's look at Westlands and Waiaki Way, feeding off from James Gishuru. There's an option to go through the Red Hill Link Road. There's no traffic there. Go the long way through Spring Valley and then out into the city. There is your option. Let's look at Mombasa Road, where traffic has just started to build up. We're coming back past Sabaki out towards the SGR, then on to Cabanas. Not too terrible right now. Uhuru Highway is looking really good getting into the city. All the roundabouts should treat you well as you get then to Haile Selassie at that avenue there, going out into the city and then through into Westlands. So the most action we're seeing this morning is on the Thika Superhighway. Where else? Outer Ring looking pretty good. Juja Road, a little bit dot of traffic in and outbound as you get then out towards Muranga Road. We'll keep an eye on things this morning. Where are you? What are you doing? Let us know where you might be stuck or where you find a good route to use this Friday morning. Talk to us on SpiceFM KE on Twitter. Text 40127.
Sugar and spice and everything nice. Everything nice.
Spice up your life. Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself.
Let me take you to Shiman's in Mombasa.
Done right.
There's a couple.
94.5.
The man is called, not Vincent Adet, the man is called Evans Othiambo, and his wife is called Saumu Ali. Now, they had gotten some job to offload a truck which had some wheat flour. When they were doing that, Mr. Evans Othiambo decided one bale of wheat flour, let me just, put it aside. And then aside ended up in going home. The wife was also there. She saw him doing it, and she initially did not realize that the husband was stealing the wheat flour, but she later realized, and they were both arrested and they were charged with stealing food, a bale of wheat flour. So they went to court, and Miss Saumu said, you know what, I saw my husband doing it. I'm really sorry. We didn't have food at home. He brought it home and we cooked for our children, and we have been doing that. I really would like to plead for forgiveness from your honorable magistrate. The magistrate asked the man, and you? He said, I'm guilty, your honor. It's true I stole, but I looked at this and I saw this is food. Can I just take some and go and cook for my children? Upon reviewing the probation report presented in court, the magistrate, Vincent Adet, asked court users to donate whatever they could to help the accused persons. He said, I pity the situation of the accused persons, especially Miss Saumu, who is the mother of 2 children. I have considered the circumstances under which the offence was committed. I sympathize especially with the first accused, that is Saumu, whose children are currently living with her friend. I'm asking the court users to donate something small, and I'll start by giving out my donation. I'm of the view that let's buy her a bale of wheat flour today and some meat. The magistrate told the court. There was cheering, and everybody in the court was like, yes, let's do that. He gave out 1,000 bob, and other people contributed and they gave money. He gave both a non-custodial sentence of 6 months, told them, go home, here's food, you're going to be reporting to a probation officer every day, and this and the other, please don't repeat it. A complete direct case in court here. Magistrate just looked, okay, so you guys have been in police cells, the 2 of you, where are the children that you had stolen to go and feed? They are living with a friend, okay. What is it that happened you stole so that you can feed your children? Yeah. Are you're saying you're guilty? Yes. Okay, what is this? Let's release them, but we don't just release them, we also support them. What do you think will happen after a week, though?
When the food runs out?
Yep.
This is it.
Odhiambo has a job, a part-time job, casual job. He washes vehicles, sweeps. what this magistrate did is what the universal basic income purports to do. It's not going to save you. What it does, it stops you from getting into, well, you're already poor, but it stops you from sliding into abject poverty to the point where you actually have not just nothing, you have less than nothing.
Yep.
Somebody gives you sustenance for a week. That's a week in which you can think, and a week in which you can regroup, and a week in which it is, should I say, better than nothing. Because previously, what were they looking at? What was there? Nothing. So
they were looking at the thing that got them into this deal in the first place.
So this now at least is a hiatus. It's a breather. With a breather, one can always think of what next to do. But as I read this story, that's what came to my mind. You see, if you don't have a plan for people like these, where they know there's some 200 shillings I can get on a daily basis. So the issue of food is taken care of. I can now think of what next to do. When the economy changes or when something else happens, and this something happening is actually the purview of the government. It's them who are supposed to ensure that this something, the enabling environment within which people like this can survive, actually is a reality. When that happens, then the need for that pick-me-up may not be there. But so long as circumstances are as they are, I'm afraid there are too many Kenyans who are in this very same situation.
This is true.
There are very many people. We have all those programs already currently in place, right? It's just that they're not covering as many people, and they wouldn't even be able to cover so many people. The Inua Jamii program and all the other cash transfer programs for to support communities. People register, people don't get the money.
Eric, that is absolutely true. You know,
because the government does not even have the money to.
No, that issue of the government not having money, that one, you know my view on this particular subject.
It's a question of priorities.
Yes.
Even when they do have the money, a fellow who's promised 600 shillings a day, at the end of the week he's supposed, because they work Monday to Saturday, at the end of the week he's supposed to get 3,600, and the fellow who's supposed to be paying you says, oh well, you know, this money has been reduced by 200 per day.
Yes.
600 left government.
Yeah.
400 goes to you because, you know, facilitation fee. What absolute nonsense. So even when they do have the money, it's still being pilfered at source. What are we talking about? The ability to remove people from such a humiliating situation is there. The ability exists. The will to do it is something totally different.
You know, Eric, you mentioned the programs. It's like the programs are set in place so that it can become a discussion point. And you say, what about, but we have this program.
We have a list even of people who registered.
But we have this other program.
And in the last financial year's budget, we allocated 10 billion shillings
for this program.
Jamii, and money is dispatched every 2 months.
Yeah, but the budget is always, it's the same, it's like having conversations around GDP. The GDP number looks fantastic if you look at it, but if you actually break it down and ask where's that growth coming from, it's essentially because of government spending. There's a big surge in government spending. How is that government spending being funded? There's a lot of debt that we're taking on in order to fund that government spending. So even if the GDP number looks fantastic, the reality on the ground is very, very different. We're now looking at, if you look at, once you factor in inflation and you ask this 1,000 bob of yours, what would it buy
right
in 2017 and 2022 today? If you look at those 5 years, in 2017, we had negative income growth, right? Your purchasing power was eroded. Same thing happened in 2020, same thing happened in 2021. And that's on average across the private sector. For a lot of people in this country, we're struggling. And the sort of policies that we're putting in place now don't seem to be cognizant of that at all. Last year, when parliamentarians woke up and decided, you know what, let's reverse all these tax cuts that we gave guys in the middle of COVID, that was fantastically nuts. People are struggling, and you're basically saying, as government, as MPs,
I need your money.
Struggle some more.
Give us your money.
Yeah.
Give us this thing you don't actually have.
Squeeze the cow a bit more. Squeeze it. Not that it has any milk to give you, but squeeze it some more. That's the logic here, and it's very bizarre.
There's a calf and it needs to be fed. So milk must come out of this cow.
Well, not necessarily to feed the calf.
Exactly.
That's the issue. What are you looking at, Rama?
Safaricom's numbers had some very interesting data in them yesterday. And one of the things that stood out for me was the fact that Fuliza is now essentially their best performing financial services product. And you can be of two minds when you're looking at this sort of thing. On one hand, as an investor, you look at these numbers, and if you looked at NCBA results, you'd have sort of noticed this trend coming through, because the portfolio of outstanding loans that they've given, it's just grown at phenomenal rates, right, year over year. It's gone from around $3 billion, well, the equivalent of $3 billion to $5 billion last year. And Safaricom obviously is a key beneficiary of that. But at the same time, as a Kenyan consumer, as a Kenyan citizen, knowing how we tend to use digital credit, there are concerns around there, right? I remember the headline that was used last night on KTN Prime was, "We are a Fuliza nation," right? And you could apply the same arguments to how we spend money at government level, but we'll get to that later. But $9.7 billion being borrowed every week. As an investor, I like the story I'm seeing from Safaricom, but what does that say about the status of individual finances at household level, right? What does that say about our ability to keep our households running? That's a concern for me.
But people are borrowing 9.7 billion shillings every week on Fuliza, but Fuliza has not recorded high non-performing loan portfolio. So people are able to pay. So what are they borrowing the money to do?
But also remember, Safaricom has an advantage that its competitors do not have. So, for example, if I borrow on Fuliza today and I don't pay it back, whatever money is sent to my account goes off first to clear that debt, right? Okash or any of the other digital non-deposit taking lenders, branch, etc., do not have a comparable advantage. So I would be that's the one thing that always comes in when you're looking at Safaricom's numbers, especially with respect to Fuliza. They have an advantage that the rest of the market simply does not have. But at the same time, if you look at Fuliza's performance and then you compare it to their other structured credit products, KCB, M-Pesa, M-Shwari, those two are not performing quite as well, right? So it then raises questions around what is it about Fuliza that makes it really convenient vis-a-vis the other two products.
Does the market understand the difference?
To some extent.
That people know the difference between Fuliza and the M-Shwari loan.
Yeah.
Is this and the other. I'm going, I need the money now, I Fuliza, I get the money, I use.
And what you've
said. M-Shwari, I'm doing it, I get money, I use.
Yes. And what you've said is actually important, because there was an interesting survey done, I believe, in 2019, 2018, that actually asked people, when you're borrowing from these digital credit providers, what's your main concern? What are you concerned about? Because from our end of the pond, we're always concerned about the price, the cost of credit. It's way high, right? It's sky high. But what the guys in the survey said was, cost for us is not actually the problem. Can I get the money? That's it. Speed, ease of access. Those are the two key important things. And across the board, Safaricom nails it on that. So that, again, builds into their structural advantage, right? And there is, and this is now getting into territory where we have to be a bit nuanced about this. The fact of the matter is there is demand for short-term credit. Absolutely no dispute about that. But at the same time, is it properly priced? Is this the right way of delivering it? To some extent, I'm tempted to say the market will make its own decision, and people are clearly voting with their wallets, and they're borrowing.
People are going for it.
Yeah.
People are going for it, and people are paying back. So however it's being paid back, whether it's, you sent me money and then it's just taken away from Fuliza, but at least people will get it repaid and they'll go back for more.
Yes. The challenge in the long run is, does that essentially increase household indebtedness?
It does.
Of course it does.
And how do you get households out of that?
You don't.
Because remember, same time, big context, you're coming off 3 years, right, of your incomes in real terms. Once you account for inflation, your income has been in decline, right? 2020, 2021. So people are having a lot less cash in their pockets. Their ability, by implication, to service that debt, right, is
diminishing.
It's diminishing.
Yeah.
So if you extrapolate that forward, you've got to be concerned. You definitely have to be concerned. You have to ask yourself, what's a long run implication?
What's exactly happening in the market, right?
Yep.
If you look at the other story on that same page in the Standard, Kenyans gamble 463 million shillings daily through M-Pesa in sports betting craze. Every single day through the various betting apps, the money coming through M-Pesa, 463 million shillings.
Yeah.
It comes to 169.1 billion in a year.
Imagine.
That's basically a Eurobond and some change.
So what is that? Is that because people are betting, hoping to make more money? Is this are people treating this as an investment and risk?
Yes.
So it's business.
Yeah.
I'm getting money, I'm putting it here.
So I can get some more.
Yeah. There's an interesting conversation that came up earlier in the year around the stock market. And one of the things that we've consistently asked is, why are people in my cohort, right, the 30-something-year-olds and younger, why are we not investing in the market, right? And one of the answers that came up in that conversation was, yeah, but for people in the younger demographic, their argument is that why should I put money into the stock market? And yet, you look at most of the stocks there. Number one, stocks have been going down for the most part, unless you got into really, really early into Safaricom. Fair enough, that's one thing. And for a lot of these individuals, they'll say, yeah, but I can put my money into sports betting. It's quicker, it's faster, it's easier. I don't have to deal with funny commissions. I don't have to open a CDSE account. I don't have to deal with all these KYC issues. So on one hand, there's a valid argument that investing in the stock market is, at least in this end of the world, is relatively difficult, right? Because it's
a more inconvenient way of gambling.
Well, I wouldn't quite call it.
That's how they look at it.
Yeah,
I'm putting in money here. I'm hoping that the stock is going to rise, and then at some point I'll sell and make my money. I'm putting my money here, hoping that it's going to rise and I'll get my money out.
Actually, there's a difference.
At the end of the day, there's a difference, but is that how the market is looking at it? Is that how this cohort is looking at it?
No. If you look at what people are faced with, let's say I earn 100 shillings a day, and my needs per day are 300. I will look at the most critical needs that I have, and they may come to 75 shillings. So I'll spend the 75. The other 25, I'll figure I'm not going to meet the needs anyway. So why don't I take the chance that I might make more from this 25?
Yes.
And that 25 is not something you can go and spend in the stock market anyway.
No, you can't.
But I can spend it on a betting pool.
Yes, you can.
So even the way the NSE is structured right now,
should look the same way.
Yeah, it's basically it's almost like saying, yeah, well, no, we're not interested in your money.
It's elitist. Maybe that's a conversation that now they should have. Kiprono Kitoni and the others at the NSE.
The conversation I think is going to be had, and it's to some extent it's already being had. The way it's playing out now is that you'll find a lot of individuals who are saying the way the stock market is trading now is nowhere near where it should be, number one, in a world where you can go online and find people your age, your cohort in the US trading on apps like Robinhood. And they will ask, and it's a legitimate question, if you can trade apps and settle instantaneously in a place like Robinhood, if you can buy stocks in the US, on the FTSE 100 in the UK, why am I buying stocks here?
Yeah.
So if you can trade on global where you're getting higher returns and you're almost assured that there will be a return, for example, in a manner in which it seems to be flawless, why?
And it's a wider spread.
I mean,
surely.
And there's an interesting anecdote, one last one here from Jane Karuku, the EABL MD. And the way she explained it was actually quite interesting. EABL points out that their competition for spend in the past, if we had this conversation in the early noughties, the 90s, betting wouldn't even be in that conversation. But today, if you're looking at the segment that buys, say, for example, the keg beers, their choice of spending includes, your competition includes betting companies as well.
So it's the beer or the bet.
Do I keg or do I bet?
So maybe breweries ought to go into that business.
No.
Okay, City, your story?
The story that I had was an interesting one, The Star. I found it particularly interesting because it tells us that the election we're about to have is going to be a completely interesting one. It says, Ruto conquers Mombasa as Sonko races to the top. According to a poll that was conducted by The Star, Okay? This is what they said. 49% of those who asked whom they might vote for in August, 41.9% said they would vote for DP Ruto against 37.5% who said they would vote for Raila. Okay? Now, if you look at the 2013 election, where Raila garnered 69.7% of the votes in Mombasa, while Uhuru Kenyatta got 23.7%, it means the DP has gained significantly. Now, the question that I always ask whenever I look at these figures, and especially for people who are running for the highest seat in the land, is it that they favor this particular candidate more?
Or is it that they're rejecting the other?
Yes. And if they're rejecting the other, the question is, why are they rejecting the other? And then, lastly, the sentiments that are represented by this particular poll, how permanent are they? Because we know that at one point the polls will say this, but as you move along, the polls will change. And what will be the things that, what will the determinants? What are the factors that will perhaps bring about this particular change? Now, I say it's interesting because it's the same question you'll ask for the vote-rich central Kenya, which this same article indicates that the DP is ahead. But of significance, they also say that what has been seen was places where the former Prime Minister would get votes percentile terms in one digit have now moved to two digits. So essentially, he's
so
also...
Raila is gaining.
He is gaining, yes. Where previously he had fewer votes, he's gaining more. Okay? So again, you're saying that these dynamics, now as we approach a point where the campaigns are going to generally get genuinely heated up, these polls will change. That's what I'm saying. But the question that I've asked, those are the ones that require answers. And
what's causing the change?
Yes, and I personally do not have the answers. So I'm waiting to see. Yes.
Sonko has been rising in Mombasa in all these polls.
Sonko is a popular politician. And anyone who talks about the state of this country should look at Sonko and ask why Sonko, with everything he represents, still manages to be as popular as he is.
You also have to look at what he does that injects this popularity.
Yes.
Because you ask the question, all right, nobody was singing the Sonko song at the coast a year ago.
No.
He goes down to the coast and there's certain things that he's doing that are directly related to livelihoods that we've been talking about now. People had problems and they're being sorted out, and that's at the heart of the matter. Somebody's going to make a decision based on what you did for them. So you become increasingly popular, and that's just the size of it. Did the same thing in Nairobi.
Yes, he did.
Why did 800 and something thousand people vote for him? Why? What was he doing that's directly related to then the allegiance that you pay to somebody?
When the majority of Kenyans make decisions on their livelihood on a daily basis, it means their problems can also be related to things that happen on a daily basis.
We have become a fuliza country.
Yes. So when you have somebody who understands that and deals with your immediacy, that person automatically becomes popular.
Exactly.
And the consequences, unfortunately, tend to be a bit grim over the medium term. Because fine, we've made for example, Sonko, right, Nairobi, runs for governor, he's voted in. And there are those who will say, yeah, but there's, like you say, there are those who will vote for him because he's solving an immediate problem. He came into this neighborhood and he provided this much of food, right? He sorted this particular problem that we were facing. Fair enough. There are those who also voted for him because they're just like, you know what, this is a protest vote. I don't like the other guy.
I don't necessarily want this guy, but this will get that guy out.
Yes. Yeah.
So people are voting out Kidero.
Yes.
Right? They're like, okay, we don't like Kidero, we're done. Yeah. But what did it get us at the end of the day?
Sonko.
And 5 years of dysfunction at the Nairobi County government. So
that drama depends on who you ask.
Yeah, it does, but and it's an ongoing conversation that we will still be having 5 years from now.
Sure. Keep it here for more. In the next hour, we have a guest who is a professor at USIU. He'll be here with us to talk about the situation in Sri Lanka. Do we have any lessons that we can borrow in the country? Elijah Munyi at 7. Good morning.
Spice up your life. The latest news from around the world.
This is
94.4.
Newswire. I'm Dennis Oseto. President Uhuru Kenyatta chaired a full cabinet meeting at State House, Nairobi, where key decisions affecting different sectors were ratified. Notable approvals include payment of the National Youth Service historical pending bills that have been verified and authenticated by the pending bill multi-agency team. This comes as a relief to suppliers who have not been paid for years since mega graft scandals rocked the institution. Payment to suppliers owed close to 14 billion shillings was stopped in 2015 following the NYS scandals, in which nearly 2 billion shillings was lost through fictitious procurement. And Amani National Congress Party leader Musalia Mudavadi now claims that yesterday's cabinet meeting, summoned and chaired by President Uhuru Kenyatta, was a political target for Deputy President William Ruto. Mudavadi argued that the meeting was meant to ensure that the DP, who has long been at loggerheads with his boss, Mr. Tendon, saw that he could be accused of skipping government functions as he hailed Ruto's decision to attend the meeting. Mudavadi said Ruto's move was counter-effective to his political rivals, whom he said were planning to taint his name in bad light for allegedly not delivering on his duties. The ANC leader similarly accused the state of trying to dupe Kenyans after the Kenya Kwanza Brigade previously raised concerns that no cabinet meeting had been held in more than 1 year. And Central Organization of Trade Union Secretary General Francis Atwoli has spoken out against the Kenya Kwanza coalition over a recently leaked power-sharing deal. Atwoli told off the coalition's presidential flag-bearer, Deputy President William Ruto, terming the post-election agreement as blatant deceit to his core principles. According to the court boss, the DP has allotted what he termed as unrealistic demands to his fellow Kenya Kwanza leaders, while also giving inferior promises of positions if he ascends to the highest office in the land. At the same time, Atwoli recalled DP Ruto's past criticisms of the Building Bridges initiative, where Ruto accused its proponents of leading selfish politics of sharing positions rather than focusing on the needs of Kenyans. In the same light, Atwoli outrightly asserted that Ruto is currently playing double standards by creating positions that he once vouched against. And this year's Madaraka Day celebrations will be held at Uhuru Gardens, Nairobi. While inspecting the preparations, Interior PS Karanja Kibisha said that the celebrations will be held in Uhuru Gardens in appreciation of the significance of this particular event. Kibisha revealed that the preparations were almost complete, adding that as a committee, they were satisfied to give Kenyans a colorful celebrations. According to Kibisha, the National Celebrations Committee is also considering allowing counties to host gatherings alongside the national event. A Mombasa magistrate has warmed the hearts of many Kenyans after he ordered for a mini harambe for a couple that had been charged with stealing a bale of wheat flour. The couple, a middle-aged woman, was charged alongside her husband with stealing contrary to Section 268(1 as read with Section 275 of the Penal Code. Principal Magistrate Vincent Adet, in his ruling, however, sympathized with them on grounds that the poor couple stole so as to provide for their children. And the last major fugitive wanted for his role in the 1994 Rwandan genocide, Protes Mpiranya, died in Zimbabwe in 2006. Charged with genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity, Mpiranya commanded Rwanda's Presidential Guard, a feared outfit accused of targeted assassinations during the 100-day massacre of Tutsis and moderate Hutus. UN prosecutors had spent more than 2 decades hunting him down following his indictment by the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda in 2000, but in fact, he had died of tuberculosis nearly 16 years ago. And the Tibet Airlines plane caught fire after skidding off the runway in the southwestern Chinese city of Chongqing. All 113 passengers and 9 crew members were evacuated safely. More than 40 passengers with minor injuries were taken to hospital, according to a statement from the Chongqing Jiangbei International Airport. The Civil Aviation Administration of China said that 6 people suffered bruises and sprains during the evacuation. And North Korea confirmed its first ever COVID-19 cases and declared a serious emergency, with leader Kim Jong-un appearing in a mask on television for the first time to order nationwide lockdowns. Hours after the shock announcement, the first time the nuclear-armed country has admitted to having COVID cases, Seoul's military said it had detected 3 short-range ballistic missiles fired from near Pyongyang. The launch, one of more than a dozen sanctions-busting weapons tests so far this year, comes shortly after Washington warned that Kim's regime could test a nuke any day, with satellite images indicating fresh activity at nuclear sites. This is Newswire. I'm Dennis Sasseto. Good morning.
Spice FM, Nakuru.
Okay, at a few minutes after 7 o'clock, Thika Superhighway has packed up quite significantly, and we're seeing traffic going all the way through to the Outer Ring Junction and then trying to get into the city. Really, really heavy there. Coming out of Westlands as well, quite some traffic on Waiaki Way. You can use the Red Hill Link Road. That's free and clear for now, getting you out into the city. All right, coming off Mombasa Road, not too bad at all. Getting out past General Motors and then through towards the Nyeri Stadium roundabout, you should be all right. It's picked up quite some on Langata Road this morning. Rilo Dingo Way, not looking too bad. You can use that as an option to get towards Ngong Road and then out into the city that way. Okay, let's keep an eye on things coming out of industrial area as well. Jogo Road started early. That seems to be thumping with traffic here and there, but you should be all right. State House, looking at that whole Dennis Pritt, Kileleshwa in there, that whole mess is doing the thing this morning. Limu Road, in and outbound traffic. Kiambu Road, bumper to bumper, all the way past the DCI headquarters out towards Muthaiga Square. So it's Friday morning. It's normal for what's happening now. Nothing too crazy at the moment. Hopefully we can remain just so. Talk to us if things get out of whack. SpiceFM KE on Twitter. Text 40127.
This is the Situation Room, the home of hard-hitting political commentary and penetrating insights about the state of the nation. This is a talk radio experience like no other. The Situation Room, a place for hard truths, debates, and elevated conversations. The Situation Room, witty, political, engaging, deep, controversial. In the room, we have C.T. Muga, researcher, academic, seasoned political observer, a fountain of wisdom in these politically uncertain times. Ndu Okoh, Nigerian by birth, Kenyan by choice, communications expert, Pan-Africanist, a truth seeker and believer in people power, and Eric Latiff, agent provocateur, the man in the chair, seasoned journalist, news hound, a man who believes in punching up, not down.
Okay, it's 7 minutes after 7.
is
A
the
very good morning to you.
Situation Room.
How are you doing? Welcome to Kenya's biggest conversation. If you're just joining us, it's Friday the 13th of March 2022. We are in March until when?
Until we are told otherwise.
Yes. Until the
We'll be
president
maybe
ushers
out
us.
of March tomorrow.
Akuna,
About
we are
that.
not going. We are not going.
Is that a protest
Power
statement?
bills have to come
Everything
down.
has to happen.
The prior promise was electricity coming down by 15% by the end of the first quarter.
Which ended on the 31st of March. So since that has not happened, we can't possibly be out of March. Abby? We also
We'll
knew
stay
that
there.
the president was going to drive from
Machakos.
Machakos Junction to Rironi by March. You know, March has
He was
31 days.
confident.
He was confident of this. And he had the CS standing next to him saying, you know, I have been told this would happen. So, I mean, clearly, obviously, this has not happened. So we can't possibly be out of March.
And because we trust our president, we can only believe that, what has happened is that on the calendar in State House, we're maybe somewhere end of January. Yeah. That's why he hasn't been told, Mr. President, you're going to drive on the road. He'd be like, I said March. What's wrong with you people? So until then, we stay here. Keep it here for more conversations. CT has the day's proverb from South Sudan.
Yes, the last proverb from South Sudan. You cannot feed your donkey only when you need to ride it.
You cannot feed your donkey only when you need to ride it. Okay.
Questions arise though.
Yeah.
Are donkeys only used for riding? The answer is no. It's a beast of burden, is it not? And the question that you raised, Eric, are donkeys actually fed? Or are they left to feed themselves? But we said maybe in southern Sudan they feed donkeys.
Maybe.
Even here we do now.
We feed donkeys.
We feed donkeys.
Okay.
Yeah.
You've actually seen that, Elijah?
Yes.
Where?
In Moya. They have, before where they sleep, you cut things up and put them there.
Like cows?
Like cows, yes.
Wow.
Yes.
So the campaign by the lady who was here, what was it? What was the organization? Oh, that are taking care of donkeys and
around the world, right?
So it's working.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
good
they feed
stuff.
at night, and in the morning they are okay, but they will still keep on feeding along the way. Yeah.
We were of the misinformed view that usually they're just left to fend for themselves. And indeed, now you see,
They go grazing.
we're now better informed.
Or maybe this proverb is saying that provide a source of food, not necessarily put it right there, but allow it roam free to go and look for food.
This, of course, is the beauty of proverbs.
Next thing you'll see people doing, like they did with pets, dogs and all. Start having some particular kind of sand that is sold. This is good for donkeys. You know what the donkeys?
Yes. It helps with digestion.
It helps with digestion. So that the donkey can be playing on this sand as they like to do, rolling on the sand.
It won't be a very long step between that and being told, yeah, my donkey is my comfort animal now.
Oh, yes.
Tell me this rubbish.
Elijah Munyi is an adjunct professor at USIU, and he's also a man who studies China. He joins us because we want to talk about what's happening in Asia, particularly in Sri Lanka. Before I introduce him, I want to read today's editorial in the Standard. And it says Sri Lanka's Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa resigned on Monday following days of nationwide protests over the cost of food and fuel that had driven inflation to 30%, up from just 6% last August. Rajapaksa is now holed up in a military base as protesters around the country burn down homes belonging to politicians believed to have contributed to the country's economic crisis, while his brother, the president Gotabaya Rajapaksa, refuses to heed calls to resign. Sri Lanka is the latest country to witness socio-economic upheavals stemming from the inability of government to keep up with debt repayments, fund day-to-day operations and development projects. Zambia, Lebanon, Argentina, Belize and Suriname are some of the countries that have defaulted on their international debt obligations. Until their defaults, these developing countries were all hailed as the bellwether for economic development in their respective regions. Today, their citizens are experiencing the worst economic crisis in a generation, with businesses closing up, mass unemployment and high food prices with no end in sight. Kenya's inflation for the month of April stood at 6.4%, similar to Sri Lanka's last August, before citizens took to the streets. The high cost of living is impacting both businesses that are struggling to recover from COVID and households that are struggling to tighten their belts and build savings to help them climb up the socioeconomic ladder. Despite all the reassurances and speeches from the government and the National Treasury in particular, several indicators point to Kenya being on the brink of a severe debt crisis that the country has never experienced before. According to the Controller of Budget, Kenya spent 1.1 trillion shillings out of 1.3 trillion of the Consolidated Fund on debt repayment in the first half of the 2021-2022 financial year, meaning less money is available for both recurrent and development expenditure, and the National Treasury is now resorting to taking on more foreign debt to pay salaries and wages in complete violation of public expenditure protocols. Last year, the National Treasury backdated 165 billion shillings in budgetary expenditure for the 2020-21 financial year. The money came from proceeds of a sovereign bond and the IMF that were then disbursed to ministries and county governments. The fact that the disbursements were, for the first time in Kenya's recent economic history, made after the end of the financial year means the government has quite literally gone broke. And the editors at the Standard are saying, don't allow Kenya to go the way of Sri Lanka. All the red flags, all the indicators of everything that's been happening in Sri Lanka over the last couple of years. COVID. Of course, there was a terrorist attack that now also impacted on the tourism, which is a big foreign exchange earner for the country. And then the government in panic and trying to do the things, cutting tax, giving tax rebates, saying we are not going to be importing fertilizer, so everybody must go organic. That affects food production. That raises the cost of food. All those
Questionable
things.
infrastructure projects. and these are funded by loans.
Heavy debt.
So, I mean, it's
which country are you
huge.
speaking of?
This is the thing. Now, can you draw parallels? And I think that's what that editorial comes off and talks about. Can you draw parallels between what has gotten Sri Lanka into the problems that it is in today and what might be currently happening in Kenya?
Elijah, when you hear this, what do you see?
The parallels. yeah. And I think, so one other thing, apart from that very interesting statistic on inflation, yes, we are where Sri Lanka was last year. Yeah. When Sri Lanka defaulted, which is around this time, it was at 71% debt servicing as a percentage of their total revenues. We are at 63. We are one of the highest. Maybe top 2 in the world, top 3 in the world. So it means for every income, that conversation about the consolidated account, any income that we get, 63% of it goes to repayment of debts. And I was just thinking, even for us in our banks and SACCOs, there's something that says you can't take a loan beyond a certain point.
Yeah,
30%, I think.
Yep.
30%. Yeah. So now we are at 63. Do we have a national regulation policy on how high that can go? One, I don't think so. I think we need that. Do we have an international agreement, understanding of IMF and China on how high that can go? So the parallels for Kenya and Sri Lanka are immense because there's debt, which is a conversation that we have. There's a debt cause in the Sri Lankan crisis. China is heavily involved. And China is interesting for us too, because what has been happening in Sri Lanka is contrary to what the Chinese claim, which is this idea of non-intervention. But what has happened is that actually the Chinese, because of their immense investments there, have become deeply entrenched in domestic politics. And the entrenchment is basically to support Mahinda. So he's been the president, prime minister, minister of defense, minister of finance.
He's the country.
He's the country, yeah. So it's a question of how the debts translate from being national to how one individual becomes so central to this. So now if we are on the verge of default ourselves, what are the Chinese going to do?
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
How do you see the parallels playing out between Zambia's situation? Because just for context for our listeners, Zambia defaulted on its debt November 2020, which is what we spoke about the last time I was here. Defaulted. They missed a payment of $42.5 million on one of the Eurobonds, and it's taken them this long to essentially set up a creditor committee. And one of the main issues that cropped up, I believe the previous finance minister, not the current one, the previous finance minister at the time said one of the reasons why there's an issue in setting up this creditor committee is because the China Exim Bank was saying, listen, you want to have credibility, you want to have visibility into the debts that we've given this country, you have to sign an NDA. And all the other creditors were saying, what are you talking about? That's simply not going to happen, right? So walk us through what you see the situation playing like in Zambia and how that may inform what might happen to us.
Yeah, I think generally for me, it's a question of how our problems, our debt problems, Kenya, Zambia, Sri Lanka, and so on, at least will galvanize some collective agency on the African countries, for example, to say to China, we cannot operate the way you want in terms of the non-disclosures. We've got to have public awareness of what is happening. And that has to be informed by our laws, for example, as Kenya.
And actually, that's a good point that you raise, because under the Constitution, we have a right to know what our government is spending our money on. Because it's not government money.
It's our money.
Right? Yes. That's a huge misnomer. It's not government money. It's the taxpayers' money.
Yes.
And yet Treasury is stuck to this line that, no, we're not going to tell you what's going on.
So, and what are we supposed to make of that anyway? There's a problem. There's a problem somewhere. And it's because they overborrowed or there's corruption and so on. In other words, we can't see the value of the money, simply. Ultimately, it's interesting because I think the people to get us out of this mess on non-disclosures, again, is going to be the World Bank, the IMF, interestingly or unfortunately.
But will they really? Because the IMF has just been sort of taking a back seat to these things. They're not actually pushing as aggressively as they would for full disclosure. They're sort of being very diplomatic, for lack of a better word, about it.
Yes, I think they have to be. Of course, China is a member, is their member, is an important member, is a very powerful member of both. So they have to be diplomatic. But they're the ones, because that constitutional requirement, obviously, even now, we are not able to operationalize it. So we have it on paper, but it's not happening. But the two institutions are the ones that actually we borrow from to pay the other debts. So they're the ones who hold the whip, and they can say, well, you have to do this and this and this. And that is what happens in all situations about debt. We don't like it, but it started with Argentina. Then we had the South Asian crisis of 1997. Now we have Sri Lanka, we have Zambia. Eventually, it all comes down to IMF. And of course, when they come in, the implications after 10 years, 15 years, it's the SAP, the structural. Yeah, they are never good.
There's an interesting point you raise there with respect to Argentina, because one of the things that we often tend to hear, at least on this side of the world, is that, Argentina's defaulted how many times on its debt, and they still come back into the market, and they still get to borrow money.
Yeah.
And in this entire conversation that we've been having, especially with respect to debt, every time this question around debt transparency has been raised, I remember, I think it was either 2020 or 2021, the Treasury PS, Julius Moya, was asked. This was during the budget hearings, for the budget sector hearings. And I remember asking the question, like, why aren't you just being transparent on the debts that we have? Have you actually asked any of our creditors, because this was in the middle of the DSSI, the Debt Service Suspension Initiative, where creditors in the West had basically said, we're going to give countries 12 months, at least initially it was until the end of 2020, then up to the end of 2021. Don't service our debt, focus on COVID. And at the time, his response was quite interesting, because he ducked the fundamental question and instead said, Kenya keeps servicing its debts. Kenya's never defaulted, and we will not default. Yeah, but that's not the question.
That sounds, it's actually what the government has been trained to do. They've gone through some media training and told, whenever this question comes up, Kenya has never defaulted. We had the same conversation here with the current PS for planning, Saitoti Torome, and he asked, and he said, you know what, if you look at our country, we have never defaulted. Since independence, Kenya has never defaulted on its loans, and we are not defaulting, we are still repaying.
And it's a diversion.
And the question was on transparency. The question was on how much have we borrowed? Do we have our debt register clearly transparent? Do we have the contracts transparent? The answer, Kenya has never defaulted.
And did you ask him why it's so difficult, for example, as we are talking about Argentina, to have the experiment? Let's default.
Oh, no, actually, that's an interesting one.
Yeah.
Why would we want to do that?
Because you have, in our case, like the Prof said, you're spending, if you take the first 8 months of the fiscal year, that's up to Feb, we spent roughly 60% of recurrent revenue on servicing debt. That's not sustainable. You can't keep running deficits like that and then somehow magically expect that you'll still be able to run a clean ship. If you look at our Eurobonds, yields on our 2024 notes have gone from like 4% all the way through to 10%. Now, when yields are spiking like that, what your investor base is basically telling you is, boss, we are concerned about your ability to keep servicing your debts, right? Which is deeply problematic. And Treasury had this really weird situation in the last 2 weeks, where initially they had put out a document on the website and they said, funding conditions right now to actually tap into the markets for another Eurobond of about $1 billion are not looking very good. Then they turned around when that story broke and they said, well, no, actually, we are going to issue the Eurobond. But market conditions right now are tight. The US is raising rates. The UK is raising rates. If you're a potential Eurobond investor, they will sit back and say, yeah, but your debt metrics are looking terrible. Your economy's been in trouble. Your average incomes among your citizens have been falling for 2 straight years. Why would I want to lend to you? And yet your currency is also crashing. Why would anyone want to lend to Kenya?
And that's why we can't officially default, because we survive on borrowing, And whoever is giving money legally from their end will have problems landing to a defaulting country.
So if we default, we run the risk of not being able to access
But
more.
Prof, I always find these issues of debts that countries have to be, should we say, some of the most convoluted conversations one can have. Because there is no yardstick. There is no single yardstick by which you can look at these situations and judge them to be the same. For instance, 2010 onwards, when Greece had their issue, that economy literally collapsed. But the Eurozone countries came together, helped restructure, figured out something, worked out a way in which the GDP could go up, meaning assistance was available. Okay? It's not that the problem has since vanished, no, but a solution was found and breathing space was provided for. But whenever we have this discussion about countries that fall in the category of third world countries, you suddenly find it's a doomsday scenario.
You don't have peers that can come for you to your aid.
Precisely. But what I'm saying is this. The very people who lend you money are the very people who are in a position to help you restructure and help you come up with a solution.
But they're not going to help you restructure if you don't even ask.
No. But even if you... Okay, let me get to the basics. Are we really privy to the conversations that really take place in this particular sphere? Do we know...
To some extent.
Okay, but why would somebody whom you owe money not want to find a way in which you can actually pay them back, and a way that you can manage and to pay them back? Why would they not want that conversation?
One of the arguments would be, hang on, in your capacity as a competent borrower, you came to me and said, I would like to borrow $1 million to do XYZ. Now, if you decide that you want to go and fuliza that $1 million, strictly speaking, that's not my problem. Me, I want my money back. To some extent, and this is where, again, the nuance thing comes in, to some extent, the question will still come back to us as borrowing countries. Yeah, we borrowed the cash. What did we do with it? And it is wholly unfair. Yes, I agree. To have a situation where you borrowed when the dollar's in the mid-80s, the shilling dollar rate was in the mid-80s, and you had a relatively more disciplined government, and now 10 years later you've got a government that is has no sense of financial discipline whatsoever, and is busy burning $200 million a year on this white elephant rail line. And yes, we still have to pay the debts, but to some extent, what's our responsibility in this?
And I think the conversations about what to do go on and do happen. So, and why the Greece case is interesting is because actually I like to think of it as instructive in how tough it was.
Yes.
So the Germans and the EU and the European Investment Bank, they were really tough on Greece.
They were.
And so it's not just a third world problem, as we say. If you have to be...
We're going to say that Greece is a third world country.
Yes, we are going to say that. So any restructuring of debt and being helped comes with a lot of political fallout and suffering of the people.
That's true.
The Greek people couldn't, I think they could only withdraw, was it $60 a day?
They didn't even have access to cash.
They didn't have access to cash. I mean,
how many prime ministers came and went within a very short span of time?
Yes, yeah.
It had to take Angela Merkel's direct involvement, in fact, because even I think, if I remember correctly, the other European countries were sort of, not really interested in this particular conversation.
Germany came in and carried the bulk of that debt.
Yes.
And it had a good reason to do that as one of the biggest creditors. And there was, or there is, for that kind of country, why Greece is not a third, well, it's not our kind of country, let me not say third world. It's part of the EU, which has a good institutional framework of borrowing and spending and so on, deficits and so on. So there was a big understanding on the part of Greece that we accept, we have to suffer for it. Here, we can do the same. And this is why Zambia is interesting. This is why Sri Lanka is interesting. Because part of why the Chinese have become politically involved is because during elections, the then oppositions, the people who have come into, I think there was a Zambian president, I don't remember who it was, who said we have to look at this Chinese involvement. In Sri Lanka, it was we have to tear down this contracts. Now, for us, we don't know them.
Mm.
And this is why the Chinese said, wait a minute. We can't let somebody who is going to tear down the contracts come in.
Mm-hmm.
So we just have to push this guy. And they became so involved. And it's because, so in a proper situation, which is not extreme, the resolution always comes to the IMF. And this is why we say they are the lender of last resort. They seem to be the ones able to have a structured, painful, but a way of visiting us out, unfortunately. Yeah.
Do you think, given the fact that we've seen a lot of Chinese, that the amount of Chinese lending going into a lot of sub-Saharan economies in the last, I believe, 5 years or so, it's sort of been in decline. In 2018, Uhuru Kenyatta was in initially Shanghai, then Beijing, and they were looking for funding for phase 2 of the rail line from Nairobi all the way to the Ugandan border. And China at the time, and even today, said no. And there's been a general slowdown in Chinese lending across sub-Saharan Africa. Do you think there's a sort of realization on their end that they lent too much, too quickly, and they've probably created problems that they're not 100% sure how to fix?
I think so. And I think it's good on their part to admit that and to correct it.
But also consider, maybe they had foreseen such a thing and they had taken contingencies. Because with the debt, they now have a foothold. They are in a position to actually have a say in what happens in your neck of the woods. So while
it was a political move.
Yes, I'm trying to think that there's that possibility, because why then do they need to give you more money when they know very well that the money they've given you serves their purpose?
Well, is it possible that it was an intelligent move on their part, based on what their initial intent was? Because we can't run away from the fact that economic control, the whole geopolitics of this commercial ventures plays a role here, that that a country's inclination will be to default. And as a result of that default, you will then have an element of control over said country.
Absolutely.
Which is what a lot of world powers want to do. Whichever MO they use, it'll get them to that point eventually. Can we run away from that possibility?
No, and I think it's not actually a possibility. I think it's a reality. It's interesting because around what they call the pigs, the Portugal, Italy, Greece and so on, actually China came to the rescue of those countries.
Yeah.
China made entry into European creditor. So you've got a China which basically... I mean, it's a very interesting civilizational sort of spin.
So if we look at Sri Lanka, and I know Eric wants to go to break, but if you look at Sri Lanka here, maybe the initial intent was not for Sri Lanka to end up in pieces like it almost is right now. Initially, it was to help, but then it's also advantageous to you if they are in pieces.
Yes, the only danger for China, I think, about countries getting into pieces is that you never know where they look help for, and this is why I think it's irresponsible even on China's part.
Right.
Certainly irresponsible on Sri Lanka's part. If you're really at the corner, like Kenya is doing now, slowing down on Chinese debt, kind of going back to traditional multilateral borrowing. And that tends generally to increase US and the Western OECD kind of power. So I think the question for China, the question for us is what is the right balance?
Are we going into a break?
Yes, let's take a break and speak about awesome as we go into the break. Awesome is the screen, bright and beautiful in any condition, optimal viewing of your passions as you go outside. This is what we're talking about with the new Samsung A series, A33, A53 and A73, bringing awesome and awesome wear into your life. Awesome is the camera. Shoot smoother, more lifelike videos than ever. Awesome is the battery that lasts for 2 days on one charge as you bounce from one commitment to another. Do that. Experience the Galaxy A33, A53, A73. They're all 5G phones. That's where we are now. If your phone is still your 3G phone, my friend, you are so 12.
Wow.
Style up. It's 26 minutes to 8. Let's take a look at the weather and traffic. We'll be back.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
There are so many people peddling what is false and that it bears remarkable resemblance to what is true.
Politicians have their agenda, and their agenda is to use every opportunity to sell that agenda and to loot this nation.
I have seen major strides that are done in this country when we talk to each other as against talking at each other.
We start getting back into the tribal cocoons which were put to us by the colonial powers. You know, they gave us physical freedom but not mental freedom. We're still mentally colonized today into these cocoons of tribe.
Now, if you live in an area where it's difficult to find a dog,
He's a goat. I kid you not.
In which part of this country is it difficult to find a dog? So that you resort. Afande hii umbo yako iko na pembe.
Hii ni umba special.
This is the Situation Room.
The sun is coming out in Nairobi. Through to Friday, we will see in Nairobi highs of 25 and lows of 16, 17 today. Sunny conditions at 14 in Nakuru, highs of 26 and lows of 13. We're looking at clear conditions in Nyeri at 13, highs of 24 and lows of 13. 12 degrees and sunny in Eldoret, highs of 26. And sunny conditions in Mombasa at 25, highs of 31. 31 will also be the high in a sunny Malindi, currently at 25. It's mostly cloudy at 20 in Kisumu, highs of 29. 28 will be the high in a mostly cloudy Kakamega, coming down to lows of 16 today. We're looking at mostly sunny conditions at 20 in Kampala, highs of 26. Dar es Salaam is sunny at 24, highs of 31 and lows of 23. 13 degrees and clear in Johannesburg, highs of 22 and lows of 11. While it's raining in Lagos at 26, we'll see highs of 32 and lows of 25. Clear conditions in Kinshasa at 23, highs of 31 and lows of 22.
Classic soul, R&B, smooth jazz, neo soul, and nostalgic ballads.
Make some noise. Yeah.
You're listening to Spice
All right,
FM.
traffic this Friday has built up quite some on the Thika Superhighway, coming just past Survey out into the city. Slows down considerably as you get to the Pangani underpass. We're seeing traffic actually spilling well past the Outer Ring junction on the Thika Superhighway. I have to keep an eye on this one. In and outbound traffic on Kiambu Road, just past the DCI headquarters is where it's going to build up quite some. And just not too far from there into Limuru Road, in and outbound traffic, as well as you then connect to the Wangari Maathai. Coming out of Westlands, that started early and it's still bumper to bumper, coming off of Muga. James Gishuru also quite heavy, and looking at that whole Lavington stretch into Dennis Pritt, all of that is your mishmash of traffic today. Mombasa Road is not doing too bad. Actually, traffic on Mombasa Road the last few days has been really good. Meaning there's not been so much. North Airport Road then leading to Outer Ring is where you'll see some more traffic. Langata Road also really heavy as you just pass the Wilson Airport out towards the T-Mall roundabout. Or what was the T-Mall roundabout? Or what is the T-Mall roundabout? Okay, SpiceFM KE on Twitter. Talk to us there. Text 40127.
Spice up your life. Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself.
All right, 22 minutes to 8. The conversation continues. CT Muga Ndu Okoh, Eric Latiff, our guest host today, business journalist Ramanyang, and our guest for this are Elijah Muni, researcher on China and professor at USIU. We are talking about Sri Lanka and looking at our national debt and asking ourselves, are there lessons to pick from what's happening in Sri Lanka, the crisis in Sri Lanka? Ndu, that thing at Timor, you say what?
It used to be a roundabout. I don't know what it is now.
Elevated now. I call it an interchange.
Voila. The interchange.
Yes.
Okay, so
the T-Mall interchange.
There you go. I'll make sure to use that.
No roundabouting.
No roundabouting.
You are interchanging.
Thank you.
Interchanging.
Speaking about roundabouting. Okay, so I mean, that question that issue Eric is bringing up about, and even before, parallels that we can draw between the two, and still saying, are we getting to a point? It's can you getting to the point where there will be some of these things? And, just looking at what's happening, white elephant projects in Sri Lanka, infrastructure projects that are being backed by heavy borrowing. They've lost $300 million in 6 years because money just, can't really be found. Unsustainable tax cuts is another thing that has been talked about. Pandemic, another thing that has hit. There's been a fertilizer ban. Does that sound familiar? There's shortages and blackouts. Shortages of food. Blackouts because of rationing, obviously. Not being able to keep the country running. And then debt and default. Huge debt, 51 billion shillings in foreign debt in Sri Lanka, not being able to pay loans owed to creditors. I mean, it looks like it's raining cats and dogs here, maybe elephants and bulls at this rate, a lot more than they can handle. There's a tipping point, and they're probably getting into at that point. In Kenya today, if you're drawing the parallels, the hope would be that folks are looking at this and saying, you know what, guys, we need to be really careful. What's going to be the straw that would break the camel's back from where you see?
I think it's going to be food. And I think we are on the cusp of something. I don't know what. Because what has happened in Sri Lanka, I think, is we had the debt and default issues. And then the war in Ukraine, energy, wheat, which are things that we also consume a lot.
Plus sunflower oil, lots of it.
Oil. Everybody now knows the price of cooking oil. So, and I think we've seen a little bit of it with the conversations around the oil subsidy, what was happening. So if we get in such a situation again, in terms of the increases in energy prices, or the increases in food prices. I was just trying to do my calculations as well. I think it must be around 2021. I remember buying my daily bread at 42 shillings. Now it's 55. So I was trying to do the math in terms of, even if they tell us the inflation is 7%, obviously it's not that, because that's not 7%. So, and what I keep on wondering is, we talk about the price of cooking oil. How does somebody earning 300 shillings a day, what do they do? I don't know. What do they use to cook?
Do you know what they do? I mean, if we're going to answer that question, there's a lot of people, unfortunately and quite unhealthily, are using recycled oil to cook because you cannot afford it. What are you going to do? You cannot afford it. So it's going to be recycled. People are putting it in the container. CT, you gave a story about this sometime, dealing with the work that you did earlier. People are using recyclable oil to cook because unheard of that will you walk into the store and buy a liter of oil at 412 shillings today.
If somebody comes to your house to wash your clothes, or the people in the villages, I think the daily rate is something between 400 and 500 shillings. So you can't be working the whole day to buy a liter of oil.
And so it's a deeply connected world, because the fundamental problem there is that between them, Russia and Ukraine account for about 75% of global sunflower oil supplies. As long as that conflict drags on, you're going to have supply constrained into the rest of the world. Countries that are big producers of palm oil, which is roughly the alternative, have now started saying, hey, by the way,
we're not exporting.
We're not exporting. Thailand has stopped. They've all basically stopped exports. And this basically gets us back to where we were in 2008, because we saw something similar happening then when food prices spiked. And what did countries do? Impose export bans. So it stands to reason that our food price problems are going to be with us at least for the remainder of 2022, likely into 2023. So when the IMF were releasing their regional economic outlook about a week or two ago, and we're speaking to the IMF, the Africa department head, Abebe Amri Selassie, and I asked him, what's keeping you awake at night? And he paused and he said, I am concerned about the ability of people to put food on the table. This is the IMF, right? That the institution that usually we in our circles we tend to think about it and we just think of SPA, structural adjustment programs. And this is the Africa head saying, I'm concerned about people's ability to put food on the table, and that they flagged it as a serious risk to stability of economies across this continent.
Wow.
So if the global bodies who normally would not care, quote unquote care, they want to say, look, we're going to tighten screws here, we're going to lend you money, make sure you pay it back kind of thing. If a global body is concerned about how people within country are going to eat over the next, few months or years, How much more then about a government and its people? Ukraine, Russia notwithstanding, here are some of the things that we're talking about, which the country got itself into without Ukraine and Russia going into a situation of conflict. And what we are being fed, often, which might be frustrating, is that, the economy is growing. So it's okay. Just don't really worry about things. We're paying our debt. The economy is growing. We have a handle on things. If I do play devil's advocate for a moment, do we really have anything to worry about if the vanguards of the economy and the treasury are telling us, it's okay. We are paying our debt. The economy is growing. We have a handle on things. You don't worry.
Do you want us to ask the fundamental question? Do we trust what they tell us?
Should we?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Because the multitude of people are listening to this and saying, you know what, everything is all right.
Yes, and clearly everything is not all right because we everything cannot be all right when people are not affording some of the things. And I think this is where you come in with Eric, because you need to call these people here every day, at least for now in Kenya where we are, to make it a subject or an object of our conversation, political policy moving forward. Because actually I don't hear it being much of a debate. What is the food? And this is why that conversation about the IMF is, I absolutely agree. We think of them this way, but probably they're the guys who can rein us in. Domestically, people are not thinking about it. And we have three crises. We have the food and energy and COVID in a way, because we lost a lot of jobs and economies are transitioning. And I don't hear a conversation enough about strategic reserves on food, strategic reserves on medicine, because that's the other thing that tips over things when you see people dying on the doorways of hospitals. And I've been told it's happening now, because you walk into some sub-county hospitals as a pregnant woman, you're told to walk in with a blanket.
Sure.
These are the things that people say, enough is enough. And when that is happening, in the meantime, you see your politician driving 3 V8s in the same day.
And they're busy bullying you off the road because they're overlapping.
Yes.
And landing on a chopper.
Yes.
But you see, even as we ask these questions, I'd like to sort of like go back a little bit. IMF, World Bank, we are told we rebased our economy, okay? We did some magic with the arithmetic. And suddenly we stopped being a third world banana republic, and we
remortgaged our economy.
We were now a lower middle income country, and yet everything about the country to me looks quite the same. So how it is
the same or worse?
The same in that if we were on a downward spiraling trajectory, we are still there. So this story of being middle income, blah 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 blah, lower middle, it's like the rebasing was done so that we would. I'm not playing devil's advocate. No. I am looking at this thing from what I would call a realistic perspective. Why move us out of that realm where we can get cheap loans, where we can get loans at some 0.something%, where you can get loans with oversight, and then you go and get commercial loans, you get loans that have zero oversight, meaning you can get it and spend it the way you want, no one asks you. The only time the discussion of these loans is now hitting us is when we're having to pay back, and we're asking, hey, what percentage are we paying? 61? Goodness.
You've answered the question, City.
Well, that's part of the answer. The cynical answer would be actually extend it and say, if you look at where the bulk of corruption is taking place in this country and where it has taken place over the last decade, it's been procurement-driven corruption.
Yes.
So if you have procurement-driven corruption, will only make sense if you have access to cheap, readily available capital. And if I go to the IMF or the World Bank today, I'm going to be stuck with them in negotiations and paperwork for the next 3-4 years before we can even talk about putting a shovel into the ground.
And then they give you money and they come and check every day. Unakula sukuma leo, ai wewe, hii sukuma umenunua expensive sana, enda ununue ya nani?
In fact, why are you eating skuma? You should be eating sweet potatoes and domas.
Yeah. You see, we talk about China as a savior, and yet when you look at what we call world powers, what is it that makes a country a world power? These are people who have understood the need to have a sphere of influence. And how do you do this? You do it economically, you do it politically, and also militarily. So, what does that money do? Yes, you're being lent money ostensibly for projects, but what does it do? Whether you like it or not, you're beholden to them.
Well, the flip side of it is this, in as much as we can have conversations about the responsibility of the creditor countries and what their intentions and motives are, but I mean, it's 2022. We've been an independent republic for the better part of.
Have we?
Well, mostly. Let's go with that argument, right? We've been an independent republic for 50 plus.
Fine,
years,
for purpose
right?
of discussion,
right?
Independent sovereign nation.
Right.
Okay.
We've had access to a talent pool of people who know and understand how these things work.
Yes.
It's not that we do not have people who've worked within the World Bank. It's not that we don't have people who do not understand how project finance works or how to structure
We
it.
have all that. We even export that labor.
Exactly.
Yes.
So at the end of the day, if you have all of these things in hand, and yet you still go into the market and you borrow at LIBOR plus 370 basis points, which is crazy expensive money, let's be honest, in dollar terms.
And you know it's expensive money.
You know it's expensive money, and then you turn around and you essentially run your budget in a very indisciplined manner. You're opening up yourself to essentially being beholden to your creditors.
Yep.
What does that say about us? Part of the problem here, I would argue, is with us and our government.
It's not part.
Part, yes.
It's the problem. It's
Yes.
not part.
Yes.
It's the problem.
And I keep asking them that question because we have the experts. We have the experts in that building that houses the National Treasury and Planning. Those are people who understand, like you've said. They've worked in these institutions. They understand everything about running an economy. So why do they make those decisions? And it can't just be because, the political bosses have said. I keep saying, even today, even the political bosses, whatever you would say about them, they have been in that building. The people who are running the country today have been at the National Treasury and they have run the National Treasury. So what is it?
Eric, the problem that we're talking about with the reference to Sri Lanka has to do with precisely this same problem. There has to be something that points to personal gain. You are in this position, you know what you should do. But there's a competing interest with what you know you stand to gain. Remember, we have two senior government officials who are still in court over these matters in that same ministry.
Former finance minister and his PS.
Yes. What does that tell you? It tells you, because yes, they may be at the top, but they don't work alone. Now, if the ministry, the parent ministry that's supposed to oversee these matters, we can see the problems they have. Is it then a wonder that we are where we are? Because the question and the quest for transparency has been an ongoing conversation for the longest time, and it is dodged. Every time you raise it, it is dodged, literally dodged.
If I may just curve the question back, Prof, we've got a situation where we have seen Chinese banks restructuring loans for some countries. They did that in Ethiopia for their standard gauge rail line. It's happened in a few other countries. You hear occasional reports about some element of debt forgiveness here, some element of restructuring there. Is that a possibility for us? How do we even go about opening that conversation?
I think it is, and it's a good conversation. And the Chinese have started, and partly I don't like the way they are doing it, but it's an option.
What are they doing?
What they're doing is actually privatizing the debt. So if we were supposed to pay, for example, in 10 years, we could say we could take a private bank, a private commercial bank in China and say, take the debt, make it 20 years or 15 years, add the interest. Yeah. So it's one of the options.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's a good conversation. From our end, actually, I think the immediate thing is to talk about restructuring. So all the options about delaying, suspending, debt forgiveness, all those things are on the table. But one of the things that I think we really need to think about, and Latiff, we talked about it last time, is restructuring from a currency perspective. With the way the dollar is going now, we're in deep trouble and we don't know where it stops. And if this war goes on for a long time, everybody wants to put their money in the dollar.
So let me ask you this question. No, please go ahead.
Because the flip side of it is this: every time, because of the vast range of creditors that we have, right? If you're having this conversation, say 2004, it would be World Bank, IMF, Western bilateral lenders. You could put all of them into this room and have a conversation around, hey guys, we need to restructure. Now it's World Bank, IMF, some Western lenders, China with $7 billion, Eurobond guys, syndicated loans. And in some of those contracts that we have on the Eurobond side, I'm not sure about the syndicated loans because that's another question of debt transparency there, right? Those contracts have not been made public. But I know with some of the Eurobonds, some of the way those clauses treat default or default conditions, what they say is, in the event that you're unable to service your debts due to another creditor, right? You're still paying us, but we will essentially see this as a default event, right? So how then do we deal with those clauses?
So I think we can't go into the default. Essentially, that would be my Torome line. Yeah, let's not go into a default. But I think for now, let's rebalance how indebted we are in one single currency or the other. So the idea would be to say, for example, and I don't think it's a difficult conversation in spite of the range of creditors, because the currencies are limited. The currencies in which we own all these people is maybe 3 or 4.
But what determines how we borrow? I mean, is it that I can go and decide by myself I want to borrow in shillings as opposed to the dollar?
There's negotiation that takes place.
What is it that, because I mean, it's not difficult to understand that if you borrow the money and it's based on the dollar, I don't know, tell me. What are the options that are available to a country, and or is it that if we are going to go out there to borrow, we don't have much of an option?
If we want to borrow from the Chinese, a bilateral, from the Japanese, for example, and they give us a loan in yen, they bring us yens here in Nairobi. What do we do with these yens? We have to use them by importing stuff from Japan.
Yes.
It is the only way. Now we have a problem. Because how many countries in the world accept Japanese yen? So by sort of default, most countries will want to borrow in dollars because that is the language that everybody else understands. Interestingly, even the Chinese want to
lend us in dollars.
Over 95% of our debt is from China. It's dollar denominated.
It's dollar, yeah. So this is what I'm saying. I think we need to be speaking to the Chinese and to the Japanese and the Europeans and maybe one or other even non-reserve currency. Let's rebalance just for now, for the next 1 year, to take care of these. Because what has actually triggered the Sri Lankan issue also is the wiping out of foreign reserves.
Yep.
Yeah. So I'm not sure where ours are. We should have at least 4 months reserves. But once we start running out of this, we are in trouble.
That's a requirement that we have at least a couple of months of reserve. We can see the strain in the market. We've been told, well, it's because it's just a short-term, dollar issue, because people are paying their dividends to their shareholders in dollars and this and the other.
Yeah.
It'll restabilize. But let's see how it goes. Prof, we want to thank you very much for joining us today. 1 hour is a short time, right?
Yes, it is.
We want to have the next conversation in the next hour is about the how to finance the next financial year's budget. So we know the finance bill has been in Parliament, and we want to see. So Rama will take us through some of the highlights of the finance bill, and then we'll be joined by Nikhil Hira, who is an expert on these matters, and we'll talk about what is it that we should demand of our parliamentarians. The last time we had this conversation about the finance bill, and we even had the chair of the budget and the finance committee of the National Assembly joining us. She was telling, no. We are going to. The National Treasury wants to raise the price of bread. We cannot allow. But they retained excise duty on airtime. How has that impacted people? What is excise duty actually doing to people today? What is the impact of the proposals on excise duty in the finance bill? We'll discuss that coming up in the next hour. This is Kenya's biggest conversation, the Situation Room. Remember, we are giving away some beautiful hampers from Samsung, and the question we are asking you on Facebook and Twitter, if you were given an opportunity to trade in your Samsung phone, which Samsung model would you choose? If you're given the opportunity to trade in your current Samsung phone, assuming you haven't bought the new A series, which of the new A series would you choose? The A33, the A53, or the A73? Of course, we'd like to know why. Keep it here for more. It's now 8 a.m.
spice up your life. The latest news from around the world. 94.4 Spice FM.
Good morning, this is Newsline. Dennis Aseto. Wiper Democratic Movement leader and former Vice President Kalonzo Musyoka has concluded his 3-day visit to South Sudan. During his visit, Kalonzo held meetings with the country's President Salva Kiir Mayardit, First Vice President Riek Machar and Fourth Vice President Rebecca Garang over the implementation of the revitalized peace agreement. South Sudan has made significant strides towards the process of unifying the country's army and its unified forces under a single command structure, which is set to graduate soon, which has been a major hurdle. The former Vice President, who has been a major player in the peace process for years, has been in the forefront in urging the interested parties to move with speed to implement the peace deal. Last month, one of the key players in the peace process, SPLM in opposition, withdrew from the security mechanisms of the country, plunging Juba into panic and high tension. Thus, the quick deployment of the former peace envoy by President Kenyatta to South Sudan for talks with the leadership of the country. Now, the Azimio la Umoja One Kenya politicians have accused Kilifi Governor Amason Kingi of being a rebel without a cause. Led by Azimio presidential aspirant Raila Odinga, the leader said that Kingi had failed to recognize what he wants for the coastal residents. Raila said he was the one who raised Kingi politically, but he had unceremoniously turned against him and joined his opponents. And a section of independent candidates in Siaya have called on political party leaders to respect the rights of Kenyans to elect candidates of their choice in August. Led by Siaya senatorial hopeful Julius Okinda and Mildred Ogogo, the independent candidate said both the government and top political party bosses must be prepared to work with leaders that they will be given by the electorate. Speaking in Siaya town, the politicians condemned the calls for zoning the country along party lines, saying that this was negating the democratic deals that Kenya stands for. And the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission has obtained court orders freezing funds for individuals who swindled the Correctional Services Department of millions in ghost supplies. The anti-graft body has also repossessed prime properties in Nairobi for 2 officers who were fraudulently paid 16,780,000 shillings by the State Department of Correctional Services in collusion with the principal accountant Moses Sirengo for goods not supplied. A prison cleaning supervisor, Eric Kipkurui Mutai, is the main suspect in the 257 million shilling scandal that was exposed last month. His 2 prime properties and 7 motor vehicles have been repossessed. And 5 suspects arrested in connection with the murder of a 45-year-old man in Juja, Kiambu County will remain in police custody for 10 days to allow police complete their investigations. The 5, Stephen Macharia Nyeri, Alex Njihia Gaduri, Elizabeth Nyambura Macharia, Julia Wambui Macharia, and Samuel Ngenya Njenga, a sitting MCA for Gito Bokondi ward in Gatundu North, are reported to have hit Gerald Gishugu Gishuhi on his forehead Tuesday night while at Ngenya's residence at Westview Estate within Juja. Gashugu then succumbed to injuries as he was undergoing treatment at Thika Level 5 Hospital, and his body was later transferred to Thika General Cargo Funeral Home to await an autopsy. The 791 million shillings project to fortify the multi-billion Baricho boreholes that supply water to Kilifi and Mombasa counties against the floods is 38% complete, according to Water Chief Administrative Secretary Andrew Timor. The project to protect the boreholes from floods linked to climate change will be complete in November this year. Timur said the 11 boreholes was one of the biggest source of water on the coast, supplying over 90,000 cubic meters a day. He said although there were small delays due to the outbreak of COVID-19, which has disrupted the shipping supply chain, leading to the delay in shipment of materials from China, the government has asked the contractor, China Railway No. 10 Engineering Group, to fast-track the project. And efforts to position Kenya as a diplomatic hub got a major boost following the approval of several host country agreements. 4 leading international organizations will open their offices in the capital city of Nairobi, which hosts the UNEP headquarters. The 4 are International Fund for Agricultural Development, Africa Audiovisual and Cinema Commission, MasterCard, and the Rockefeller Foundation. And finally, Russia has said it will be forced to take retaliatory steps over its neighbor Finland's move to join NATO. A foreign ministry statement said the move would seriously damage bilateral relations as well as security and stability in Northern Europe. Earlier, Finland Finland's president and prime minister called for the country to apply for NATO membership without delay. It comes amid surge in public support for NATO membership following Russia's invasion of Ukraine. This is News. I'm Dennis Assetto. Good morning.
.5 Spice FM, Kisumu.
At a few minutes after 8 o'clock, we're still looking at traffic hour at this point. Coming off Thika Superhighway this morning, quite some traffic, and we're also looking at traffic coming off of Wayaki Way, quite heavy as you get then towards the city. All right, coming off Mombasa Road, not too bad this morning, and major traffic jam was noted just around Donholm, just near the train station inbound, causing major traffic. Asking for help around that area because I'm not quite sure what is causing that. So that's around that Donholm area. If you're heading there, Manyanja Road, Donholm, then connecting with Outer Ring, really heavy this morning. And then this is obviously spilling over through and through. All right, escape route onto the Thika Superhighway, but then you're going to get shocked at that because it's really heavy then coming into the city. All right, let's keep an eye on things. A few minutes after 8, let's check back in about half hour. Circle back and see what it looks like. Let's talk on SpiceFM KE on Twitter. Text 40127.
This is The Situation Room, the home of hard-hitting political commentary and penetrating insights about the state of the nation. This is a talk radio experience like no other. The Situation Room, a place for hard truths, debates, and elevated conversations. The Situation Room, witty, political, engaging, deep, controversial. In the room, we have C.T. Muga, researcher, academic, seasoned political observer, a fountain of wisdom in these politically uncertain times. Ndu Okoh, Nigerian by birth, Kenyan by choice, communications expert, Pan-Africanist, a truth seeker and believer in people power, and Eric Latiff, agent provocateur, the man in the chair, seasoned journalist, news hound, a man who believes in punching up, not down. This is the
very good
Situation
morning.
Room.
Welcome to the third hour of Kenya's biggest conversation. 7 minutes after 8 on Friday the 13th. This is how you start your weekend.
We need a nice disco track under that.
You know, yeah, right?
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Morbid.
You have the turntables there. Do it.
Yeah, I need to go to DJ school to learn how to make this work.
Yes. Our guest host today is business journalist Ramanyang. Do you still
say it, please?
Say it.
Please say it.
I've gotten into so much trouble for that.
Right.
Yeah, what time is it? 7 minutes past 8. You tuned into Kenya's biggest conversation. My name is Ramanyang.
There you go. City, do the same with the proverb.
We are tuned into the 8 o'clock show, the best show in East and Central Africa, and I am C.T. Muga. Wacha. Rama, I'm going to follow your script, my friend. I'm going to sound good the way you sound good.
In a few years' time.
Give me around 4 years. I'll get there.
Bas.
When I'm mature.
Kabisa. What's today's proverb?
Yes, you cannot feed your donkey only when you need to ride it.
You cannot feed your donkey only when you need to ride it.
Yes.
Okay. If you say so, it's fine. Maybe we'll find a way of contextualizing that proverb with the conversation that we're going to have now, which is about the Finance Bill 2022. Remember, the budget for the next financial year, 2022-2023, was presented before Parliament. The Cabinet Secretary for the National Treasury went to Parliament and he said, this is what I'd like to do, how I'd like to spend money in the next financial year. These are the areas that will receive X kind of money. These are the kind of tax measures that I want us to have in the next financial year. And then they presented a finance bill to Parliament, which is now to be discussed and debated by members of Parliament who will maybe amend and then pass it. Rama, what are the highlights of this finance bill? What are the key things that the government wants to do so that they can finance the next budget? 3 point what now trillion?
3.3 trillion Kenyan shillings. That's essentially what they need to, or rather they plan to spend for the fiscal year that's starting in July. The executive is going to be taking up roughly 60% of that expenditure. Roughly 26% of that goes into what is very innocuously known as consolidated fund services. So that's basically salaries, pensions, but most importantly, debt. And actually we have almost a 14% rise in that. And in order to pay for that, some of the key underlying assumptions that the finance ministry had, or rather they were making, was that they're going to be able to raise at least 1.7 trillion Kenyan shillings in tax revenue. So that's a mix of everything from income taxes, pay-as-you-earn, corporate income taxes, VAT, excise, the lot. But some of the forecasts that they had there were a bit questionable. So for instance, Treasury was forecasting a 21% increase in income taxes that they would be able to raise in the next fiscal year. Now, given everything we've discussed, job losses from COVID, we had at least 2 million people, give or take, who had lost their jobs. We've seen 2 straight years of negative income growth, 2020, 2021. In that sort of environment, how do you expect income taxes to rise by 21%? Right? That's simply not going to happen. They're expecting to have a deficit of around 6%. So the deficit is simply the gap between what you're spending and what you're able to raise through taxes. But historically, they've been able to essentially keep the deficit at around 8%. In fact, they've been running it at 8%, which is really, really high. Fiscal year 19, 20, and 2021, 2022, the one we're in now, it's also around 8.2%. So it stands to reason that the amount of money we'll end up borrowing is actually a lot more. So on the financing side, what we saw in the finance bill is a process of just raising more taxes. It's easy to ask what taxes were raised and which ones were not. And it's hit a whole variety of things. It's hit things from oil prices, it's hit flour, it's hit the food that we would like to have, and that's deeply problematic. There are a couple of changes that, of course, have been proposed by various parties, and I'm sure we're going to be getting some of the specific changes from Nikhil Hira in a bit.
So, but what are the areas? What new taxes or what new areas of tax? Already we are paying tax for. What else?
Actually, the question
is this hand is full. So so how many more fingers from Undu's hand?
Actually, what else
Squeeze
is
more.
What else is there that hasn't been taxed that can be taxed?
Realistically, not much. Not much. If you talk to Treasury, if you talk to KRA, the argument from them is always, there are people who are still not complying with taxes. But you've got to ask at some point, where's the pain point, right? Because ultimately, there's a concept you'll hear about in economic circles called the Laffer curve. And the easiest way of explaining that is to simply say, what's the highest amount of taxes you can extract from an economy before that tax collection starts to fall off, right? How many feathers can you pluck out of the goose or the chicken before the chicken says, you know what, I'm not having this anymore. I'm scratching you and pecking the living daylights out of you. That's the basic idea. And in our case, if you look at taxes as a percentage of GDP, that trend has been declining for several years now. So arguably, all these measures that KRA and the Treasury have been implementing for the last 3, 4, 5 years have essentially hit their peak. Because if we're in a situation where we'd say, these tax measures are going up, and what they point to often is, but we collected 1.6 trillion shillings in taxes the previous year. That's higher than the previous year by X amount and higher than the previous year by X amount. Yeah, you are. But as a percentage of the total output of the economy, you're not actually doing that well.
Are we to believe the information that we read from time to time that KRA has superseded the expected target during a certain season and during a certain period? I mean,
this is where numeracy is an important thing, and Kenyans need to be aware of this. If you look at the targets that usually come out for taxes at the start of the fiscal year, they tend to be revised downwards as the fiscal year goes by. So by the time KRA is saying we hit our target or we exceeded it by X amount of money, more often than not, if you compare that to the original target that was set at the start of the year, it's a completely different story. They missed that target. But even then, that target in the first place is completely out of line with economic reality, which is, to go back to the example I gave you earlier, it does not make sense for you to be simply forecasting that you're going to be able to raise 21% more in income taxes in an environment where inflation is at 6%, heading up to 7%, where incomes have been declining for 2 consecutive years, where the private sector is barely able to invest, in part because lending is not essentially picking up, and 2, even dollar access is a problem. There's a lot of things in this puzzle that just do not make sense.
Let's see if we can bring in Nikhil Hira, who is a partner with Cody Africa LLP. Nikhil, if you can hear us, good morning.
Good morning. Good to be on board.
Thank you very much for joining us in this conversation today. This is the Situation Room, Kenya's biggest conversation. Of course, you've heard the introduction that we've been having on this finance bill. The measures that the Cabinet Secretary for the National Treasury has brought to Parliament, saying this is how I'd like to raise the money to finance the next budget. What are the key areas let's not even go into the key areas, let's go into the main points of concern for many people such as yourself who have looked at this finance bill and the proposals?
So before that, I think let's just try and put this into context a little bit. What we've got here is that we went through COVID, 2 years of COVID, which was a problem.
Nikhil, are you there?
Yes, am I there? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Yeah, okay. So 2021, things changed. We saw big growth, bearing in mind that we came from a negative base. And as we went through, at the end of the year, Yatani said 7.5% growth in 2021. Even the IMF said their numbers were about 7.2. So we did grow last year. We did collect taxes. We were exceeding targets. I take on board what Rama said about whether the targets were being flexed as we went along. But the first 7-8 months of the year, KRA actually exceeded target. Then we have high debt, and I know you were talking about this earlier. Nothing wrong with debt as long as you use it for the right purposes. And of course, that means not using it for wastage and other illicit funding of things and what have you. So if we controlled that, then the tax revenue we're collecting is fine. And Rama also mentioned that our tax to GDP is falling, and indeed it is. In the 90s, most of you were probably still not born or in school, but I remember 23-24% tax to GDP ratio, which was pretty good, and we're now down at 14, which is a problem. Of course, bear in mind this is just a ratio. So if the denominator is increasing, then the whole thing will change anyway. So what this finance bill was trying to do was to bridge the financing gap. And they've done this primarily by looking at excise duty, and just about everything, any good that is subject to excise duty has been increased by 10% or proposed to be increased by 10%. They've brought wheat flour, maize flour, cassava flour into the standard rate of VAT of 16%. Last year we saw LPG and stuff going into VAT. And the issue, I think, for me is that, one, we're in an economy that's recovering. Two, the economy suddenly is taking a hit because of what's happening in Europe, Russia, Ukraine. We're not entirely out of COVID globally, although it's much improved. So where is this money going to come from? Are the taxpayer going to be in a position to do this, to pay for it? And I'm always concerned that when you raise taxes like excise duty, and you raise it by 10%, which is the proposal, and then in October you do an inflationary rise as well, although the commissioner has been given power to exempt things from inflationary rise. What happens is that people stop spending. They stop consuming. And so we had, if you think back a few years, There was a brand of beer that was meant for the lower market, doing very well in sales. Excise duty was increased significantly. What happened? People moved to the illicit brews. So not only did we lose the excise duty, we lost the VAT, we lost corporate tax, and we potentially lost PAYE because people got laid off.
Sure.
So to me, this increase in rates could end up being counterproductive. And the final elephant in the room really is that we have an election in August. And every time we have an election, we see a dip in growth, and then it takes sort of 6-9 months to come back up again. So 2022 not looking that hot.
Nikhil, I'm curious, or rather hard pressed to find the rationale or reasoning behind this. If taking all of these things that you've mentioned into consideration, then what would be the rationale between raising some of these taxes that we are talking about? If we have seen previous examples of how then people will hold on to the little shilling that they have left in a situation like this, why repeat the process knowing full well what people will do in this? I mean, just the example that you've given, not buy this beer, buy the cheap illicit brews, because you are not able to spend as you ordinarily would. Why repeat a process of which you've already seen the results in a previous time?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Look, the fact is that things are just not balancing. The books are not balancing. So just think of your own budget at home. You bring in your income from your journalistic career, and you have expenditure. Could include a mortgage, school fees, food, etc., etc. Normal people would try and make sure that the income exceeds the expenditure. And okay, yes, you could borrow. You get a mortgage to buy a house or to finance a car or whatever. What we're doing as a government, though, is that we're deciding how much we want to spend, and then we're saying, now how do we finance it? So we come up, and the last 10 years, every time I've written about the budget and the Finance Bill and Finance Act, I've said, it's a bigger budget, it's a bigger budget. It's getting bigger and bigger, and of course it's reached 3.3 trillion this year, expenditure. So if we're only going to collect 1.7 trillion in revenues, then we have to find some other way to bridge the gap. So we're in this vicious cycle where debt is going up, tax revenues may not catch up, revenues are going down. So we're never getting out of that cycle. And we've also got to remember that we are getting assistance from major financial institutions around the world, the IMF, the World Bank, and they are putting conditions as well. We may or may not agree with what they're saying, but the fact is they're giving you money and they're saying, just like a bank giving you money for your mortgage, they're going to say, well, how are you going to pay it back? And that's exactly what the IMF and the World Bank are saying. You need to tax more. My own view on that, though, is in a country where poverty levels are 50, 70% of the population, when you start taking basic commodities and taxing them to death, how does it work? I mean, the poor get poorer. Even the middle class is struggling to buy certain things. So it's only the very top echelon, the 1%, I guess, of our market that's protected from these price rises and what have you that go with it.
I'd like to ask this question, if I may.
Yes.
What would happen if we determined to just live within our means, to simply live with what we collect, as opposed to the fairy tale amounts that we keep talking about, this 3.5 trillion in the budget? What would happen?
I think it'd be brilliant if we could do that. But I'm not a politician or a political analysis or whatever. We have to remember that since 2007, we've effectively been in a coalition government. We had the Grand Coalition post the post-election violence in 2008. If I remember right, there were 44 ministries as we tried to accommodate everyone in the coalition. We then had the 2013 elections, where again although the standing party was Jubilee, it was a merger of two parties in a sense. So again, we're trying to keep both sides happy. And in a sense, even coming up this year with all these coalitions that we're forming, we're going to keep a whole load of people happy. So expenditure is just going to go up. And then, God bless our constitution. It was a very forward-thinking document. But does Kenya need 47 counties? The effect is that we've got 48 governments in the country, the center in 47 counties. And we have to pay for these people, the civil servants. So how are we actually going to live in our means? I mean, I think that would be the question to ask.
So we set ourselves up for this.
Yeah, I guess so.
But is it to the tune of 3.3 trillion shillings? Is it possible that we can actually run with a budget that is much lower than 3.3 trillion?
Well, don't forget, 3.3 trillion combines both our recurrent expenditure and our development expenditure.
Yeah.
Roughly 70, 75 recurrent, 20, 25, 30 is development. And included in that, of course, is the servicing of debt. And I heard in the earlier segment that you had on your show, we're borrowing in dollars. And when you borrow in dollars and the shilling crashes to 116 and might even crash further, don't forget when we come to repay, it's going to cost a lot more. And we saw that with Eurobond 1. You remember, we took it in 2014. We were very proud, 6.25% interest rate, what have you. When we came to repay, the shilling had depreciated 25%. So it cost us 31 effectively. And I think that's the problem. And as I say, there's nothing wrong with borrowing. Just make sure that we use it for what it's supposed to be used and not divert it to keeping our recurrent expenditure going.
There's one of the main things that's been a very defining hallmark of our relationship between the private sector on one hand and Treasury and Kerry on the other has been it's been a very antagonistic relationship between these two parties. Mushain Kunyiha, the chair of the Kenya Association of Manufacturers, mentioned a week ago that at some point you're going to need a Bill of Rights against our own tax agency because the sort of powers that are being arrogated to it are just growing completely out of proportion with the economic reality that a lot of businesses do face. Ideally, the draft national tax policy should be taking care of that, but it's not even come out yet, has it?
Absolutely. I mean, look, we've been waiting for it for a long, long time. If there's one thing I always criticize about Kenya's tax policy is that it's become extremely short-term. So we're looking at something, oh gosh, books are not balancing right now, so let's bring in a new tax. And then next year you say, well, that actually didn't work, so let's take it out. Now, that means that there's no certainty in our tax system. And if you're an investor in the country, whether foreign or domestic, you want certainty in the tax regime. Most investors, whoever they are very willing to pay the tax as long as you make it certain. I mean, if you look at a list of what does an investor look at when he's actually top 10 things he'll consider, tax is probably 7, 8, 9, 10. Because people accept they have to pay tax, but they want it to be certain. You can't keep fluctuating every year, because then you can't plan from a business perspective as well. And then you've got to also think about, and this also has an impact on what KRA is doing in a sense. As the cost of business goes up, and it has, power bills are horrendously high. With Russia, Ukraine, oil bills have gone up. And we all know what's happening at the the petrol stations. It's costing us a hell of a lot to fill our cars. And it is impacting everyone. And I will caveat that. This thing about inflation, this is now a global problem. Yesterday, I was watching Biden speak about inflation in the US. It's spiraling there. It's spiraling in the UK. It's spiraling in Europe. India, it's going up. Everywhere around the world. And this is all a function of the geopolitics that's happening around the world. So we're all in this fix in a sense. And KRA is focusing on trying to get this revenue in yes, I agree that sometimes maybe they're a bit heavy-handed, but they certainly are doing a lot better than they were back in 95 when the KRA was formed. I mean, I've seen huge changes in how they approach things. The introduction of iTax. We may not like it, but the fact is that it's the way we have to go. KRA is using iTax to do data analytical review before they decide, Rama, you're not declaring enough taxes. Right? So, and that's a good thing.
But ultimately, though, I mean, Nikhil, this whole process of just imposing excise tax on everything, because my understanding of how excise ideally should be working is that you impose it on things where, from an economic perspective, you're trying to retard consumption to some extent, right? So I'll impose excise, for instance, on fuel, because I know that, by burning hydrocarbons, there are all these negative externalities that kick in with air pollution, the health costs that come with that, etc. I'd impose excise tax on, beer, cigarettes, and so on and so forth, because of the health benefits, the health costs that come along with that. Freudian
Thank
sleep.
you, Rama.
Right, but here we are basically now expanding it to everything. Like there is no economic rationale to be imposing excise tax, for example, on food or airtime.
I totally agree with you. I think we're using excise tax all wrong. Yesterday on Twitter, someone said, is this a sin tax or a tax to just balance the budget?
Mm.
When I was growing up in the tax world, and I've been in it for almost 40 years now, excise tax was a sin tax. All those things we love to do, smoke, drink, carbonated drinks, sugar, all those things that affected our health were being taxed.
Mm.
And it was a measure designed to, as you said, Rama, to prevent that overconsumption of those things. What we have done over the years, though, this move to excise duty on bank processing fees, and every time you do you payroll and you pay PAYE to KRA, you get hit 350 shillings plus 20% excise duty. That's increasing the cost of business, and I think that's short-sighted in the way we're dealing with our economy. But excise tax was traditionally a sin tax, and it was on goods, not services. This extension to bank charges, M-Pesa charges, and so forth is, to me, counterproductive in the long run.
I think you're not getting the message here, Nikhil. The message from the government is that it's a sin to be Kenyan.
Okay, I won't. Well, yeah, you might be right. The whole thing is a sin at the end.
It's 27 minutes to 9. Let's take a quick break. We'll be back shortly after we take a look at the weather forecast. Nikhil Hira, weather and traffic. Nikhil Hira is a tax expert. He's a partner with Kori Africa. We have our guest host today, Ramanyang, business journalist. And remember, we are giving away 2 hampers today, courtesy of Samsung. If you were given an opportunity to trade in your Samsung phone today, which Samsung new model would you choose? Is it the A33, the A53, or the A73, and why? Very beautiful brand new phones, all of them 5G, all of them very good camera, all of them working very well, long-lasting battery, can go up to 2 days. And you can trade them in. You can trade in your current phone to get the brand new. So if you were given that opportunity today to trade in your Samsung phone, which of the new ones would you go for? Go to our Facebook page and our Twitter at SpiceFMKE. You'll find that question, post a comment, and you stand a chance to win a beautiful hamper. 8:26 to 9.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
Hey, it's getting hot in here. The media has greatly contributed to the moral rot that we experience in this country.
I remember a senior politician telling me, point blank, nobody steals in the field, it's stolen in the granary. So my friend, if you're going to win an election, jipange kwa granary.
I think we are suffering from Stockholm syndrome. Our violator and abuser is also our redeemer in our mind.
The whole political class, the whole political institution
is rotten. It is based on ideals that cannot progress our country forward.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
The sun is shining in Nairobi this morning. We will see highs today of 27, highs of 25 and lows of 17. Sunny conditions at 16 in Nakuru, highs of 26. 24 will be the high in a partly sunny Nyeri at 17, coming down to lows of 15. It's sunny at 16 in Eldoret, highs of 26 and lows of 12. We're looking at sunny conditions in Mombasa at 31. That'll be today's high, coming down to lows of 25. All right, mostly cloudy conditions and into light rain in Malindi, highs of 31 and lows of 26. While in Kisumu it's cloudy at 21, we'll see highs of 29. Kakamega will see highs of 28 today, where it's really cloudy at 22. Kampala raining at 22, highs of 26 and lows of 19, while it's sunny in Dar es Salaam at 25. We'll go to highs of 31 and lows of 23. Johannesburg is sunny at 12, highs of 22 and lows of 11, while it's raining in Lagos at 26. We'll see highs of 32. It's mostly sunny in Kinshasa at 23. Today's low will be 22, going to highs of 31. Still continues hot and heavy on the Thika Superhighway this morning, getting into the city. We're also looking at traffic that still continues to build up right around Westlands. That whole Donholm interchange issue still continues to be quite heavy this morning. Outer Ring is taking a hit, and then roads going towards Manyanja, and then just past Manyanja, that whole area is chocker blocked. Coming off Mombasa Road, not too bad this morning. We'll take it off the Thika Superhighway as well, just past the Utali Drift, heading out towards the Pangani underpass is where we'll see some traffic, and it's looking a lot better on Kiambu Road this morning, as well as it is on Limuru Road coming out of Westlands. Still a bit of a sticky situation, but it should pan out in the next few minutes or so. Let's keep an eye on things this morning, just in case things get a little weirder. Let us know. SpiceFM KE on Twitter. Text 40127.
Sugar and spice and everything nice. Everything nice.
Spice up your life. Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself.
All right, the conversation continues 23 minutes to 9.
Mornings
This is the
done
Situation
right.
Room on SpiceFM.
94.4.
YouTube, on Facebook, and on KTN Home. Our guest host this morning, Ramanyang, and our guest for this hour, Nikhil Hira, tax expert and a partner with Cody Africa. We're talking about the Finance Bill 2022. It's before Parliament. Proposals by the government on how they want to finance the next 3.3 trillion shillings for the next 1 year, starting July this year up to June next year. We're talking about excise duty. And much as it is, yes, and Nikhil, you're saying it's sin tax. But even look at the cost of this sin. In the last 10 years, for instance, the cost of beer, the recommended retail price for beer has more than doubled in just the last 10 years. That means that even if you're being told, all right, yeah, so this is a luxurious item, you've basically been told that you're going to pay twice as much in just a span of 10 years. Does that make sense, City?
You know, what I'm thinking of as you're speaking was the perfect example that were given by our guest of 75% of our expenditure this is recurrent. There are all these salaries to pay, and then there are these additional costs. Now, just speaking as a layman, surely, if that's where the bulk of our money goes, should this not be where we focus the trimming? This not be where we say, okay, folks, since you take the bulk of the money, how do we reduce the money that comes to you? Now, efforts that have been made in terms of talking about government reducing expenditure, that thing doesn't work. They say they've reduced travel. None of it's akin to what you call a Potemkin village, meaning a certain facade is created to give you the impression that something is happening, and nothing of that sort is happening. So even as we discuss and we keep talking about this, sometimes I actually feel helpless. I feel it's an exercise in futility. because the government has no intentions of actually reducing what it knows it can reduce. None whatsoever. They'll talk about it, but nothing happens. There's no change.
And it's been over many years.
Yes, they talk about it, and the response to reduction is continuing with what they do and taxing us more. That's the response. It's like, you guys keep complaining. Here's another tax for you.
No. I'm actually going to reduce the number of shoes I buy next year.
Yes.
But
meanwhile,
instead of 2, I'm going to reduce to 4.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, but ultimately the part of the problem, to your point, the fact is that what you tend to see with MPs in their decision-making process is that there will be tax hikes for thee and then benefits accruing to me. So last year, in fact, it's a conversation they've been having for a while now. They've been trying to essentially increase their ability to essentially get pensions paid by our money.
Yes.
Right? Okay, so you've left. You're a one-time MP. Yeah, we're going to give you a gratuity of X amount of money. And you're like, yeah, but look, if the rest of us have to essentially set up our own individual pension plans because NSSF really isn't working for the bulk of Kenyans, it really isn't working. The returns are subpar, for lack of a better word. If that is the situation that we're dealing with, why then should this collection of 300 plus people be able to essentially leech off taxpayers and say, no, I should get,
I mean, I've served you for 5 years.
My service to the nation should demand that you do 1, 2, 3.
Which service? When you're busy squeezing the cow until there's no milk in it, right? When you're busy raising taxes to a point where you're driving consumers away from a legitimate, safe product, to use the Kegbe example, into illicit products. You're endangering their health and their well-being. How is that useful? If you're going to make these sort of demands, I mean, they're not even tied to any sort of economic performance. If you're going to say, as an MP, I would like to acquire this specific pension at the end of 5 years, even if I'm a one-time legislator, fair enough. But where are your performance targets? Right?
Yeah.
What's your performance target on raising national income levels? Right? What's your performance target on raising private sector incomes? What's your performance target on keeping inflation under control? What's your performance target on keeping debt and the deficit under control? None of those things happen. This is just for them essentially a free lunch.
It is.
And yet, what stops them from getting into a pension scheme like everybody else? So that it is your money that is deducted.
You contribute to it.
Yes, but it's yours. You're paid fairly well. I mean, this story of constituents wanting this, who forces you to become an MP? It's you who decides to become an MP. And you know the lay of the land. So why are you speaking as though you've suddenly come across something you didn't know? When you campaigned, you know what happens. You've seen what happens over time. Government,
I would agree with that.
is currently constituted. Are you telling me that everything that the government spends on is absolutely necessary? The answer is no.
Thank you.
No, I would agree with what's just been said. The fact is that I pay for my own pension, or did. I'm retired now, but I did. Right? No one funded me for it. Yes, I got an employer contribution. So we could be in this position where, as an MP, you set up your own scheme or there's a parliamentary scheme or whatever. Maybe the government matches, fine. But these guys aren't paying anything towards it. And I saw in today's paper, I think that MPs are seeking a huge pay rise.
Yes, they are.
And that, to me, if we're saying performance-based, then maybe that's not right.
So are we essentially saying that members of parliament, our parliament is also helping the government to not cut down on expenditure? So when the finance minister comes and says, you know what, I've noticed that we have this kind of recurrent expenditure. I'm going to reduce on travel. I'm going to reduce on the things that we do, hospitality, flowers and all. I'm going to reduce this and the other. They don't do it. And because our members of parliament know where they can squeeze, they just allow them to do it as long as I get my this and the other.
I think it's a bigger problem than that. I mean, I think the whole setup that we have in terms of our recurrent expenditure and the fact that we're in coalitions means that we're never going to be able to reduce government expenditure. It will always climb. And until such time as we realize that, and we've heard it over the years, the successive finance ministers have said, austerity measures, we're not going to pay for this, we're not going to pay for that. We talk about corruption as well. I mean, even Even the president said that we're losing 2 billion a day or something like that. But we're not doing anything about it. We've got to do something about it.
Well, okay, so Nikhil, if you were to just take a journey towards the ideal, I mean, here obviously we're living in a really negative reality. But if we were to take a trip into the ideal, because oftentimes what paints the picture for folks is to understand what the benefits would be of an ideal situation. So could you give examples of if this committee sat down, if the National Assembly sat down and said, look, this is what we ought to do in order to make this budget a reality, or even make the crazy decision to say we cannot operate within these lines that have been drawn, what would need to be done right now? What steps should be taken? And maybe if we saw that, then it would give people an alternate reality within which we ought to be operating.
Okay, so I think the first thing, and we spoke about this a little earlier, we need a long-term tax policy. We have got to move away from short-termism, where each year we're making change to the law, and then a year, 2 years later, we're saying, well, that didn't work, let's reverse it. Because that's just not the way that business can continue. And let's be very frank, our private sector in this country is extremely resilient. It's probably one of the most resilient on the continent, and our people are entrepreneurs. We want to work. It's not that we're standing there waiting for handouts. You'll even see people on the street at the traffic lights trying to sell you something.
Yep.
And you don't. Okay, forget where it may have come from, but the fact is that they're trying to sell it to you, right? And they want to do that so they can feed their families, which is great. So let's have something that makes a government policy, both tax and expenditure and everything, that is long-term. I mean, we've stopped hearing about Vision 2030. When was the last time there was a big spread in the papers saying Vision 2030 is going to be the bee's knees for us? It's not there anymore because we're thinking very short-term. And that is an issue. And while we have coalition governments, that will always happen.
Nikhil, if I may just jump in briefly here, given your experience with tax policy in this country over the decades, what we've seen here over the decades, at least in the last 2 decades, has been a case of taxes just going up and up and up and up. But is there an example you can point to in our economic history? Because I believe we've done this before, where we've cut taxes in some way, and that has the resultant increase either in consumption or investment has essentially boosted the overall tax take that we've had accruing to Treasury.
Go back to the 90s. I know all of you weren't born there, I said earlier. But
well, not all of us.
Well, I certainly was.
Some of us have some significant carbon dating in our system. So,
yeah. So go back to the 90s. We were being taxed at top rate of tax of 65%.
65%.
Yeah, and corporate. And in fact, there was even, if I remember right, an investment income surcharge. So if you had investment income, you would be taxed a further 17% on it or something.
And there was capital gains as well.
No, not in the 90s. It stopped in 85.
Right.
So we've had no capital gains from 85 to 2015.
Right.
Then we reduced rates down to 30% between 92 and 94, 95. Have a look at a chart of revenue growth, tax revenue growth in those years when we reduced. And you'll see almost a 45-degree upward line. The reason is it becomes cheaper to pay the tax than evade, get caught, pay the penalties and interest, and potentially spend some time in community prison.
So there is a business case here. There's a strong economic case, arguably, given the economic context we're in now. Inflation is surging. Fuel prices are going completely berserk. Food prices are nuts. And for most households, we spend roughly 30 to 60% of our income on food. There is a strong argument to be made for an across-the-board cut on personal income taxes and consumption taxes.
I believe so. Maybe it can't be a drastic cut because, of course, we do have to finance the country. But isn't that what we did in 2020?
And then we reversed it. We kept it for COVID. 7 or 8 months, and then at the end of December, literally at the third or the fourth week of December, said, no, we're lifting it back again.
Actually, my view on what we did in 2020, and I said this at the time, was that it was the wrong time to give a reduction in tax, because people were losing jobs, businesses were closed. So, if I was losing jobs, I'm not paying pay as you earn. My companies are not paying corporate tax. VAT is going down. You reduce all these rates, who's benefiting? Because the market is not there.
Yeah.
And then I would have done it towards the end of 2020 and had it run through 21, 22.
So this would be the best time for such a stimulus kind of measure.
I think so. I think we do need some sort of stimulus. I don't think, unfortunately, the government has the money to do it. But I think if we did it, even if it's 5% reduction in rates or something like that, we could see long-term benefits. I think even Russia, some years ago, maybe it was in the early 2000s, they reduced their corporation tax by 1% or something. And over 3 years, corporation tax takings went up 14%. So, I think there's empirical evidence out there. It doesn't always work, of course, but there is empirical evidence that if you reduce tax rates, it means that people are more willing to pay the tax. As I said, 80%, 90% of our people or our investors are willing to pay tax. It's the price of living in a civilized society, but not being overtaxed. I think that's the problem. We're effectively being overtaxed.
Nikhil, I want to ask you a question, because it's something I hear so often. I'm in need of a learned and informed response from someone like you. When we keep saying the government doesn't have money, what do we mean?
Well, I think what it really means is that we are bridging the gap by borrowing. So the funds may be there, but it's borrowed funds. And what has happened over the years, certainly over the last 8-10 years, is we've always had borrowings. All countries do have them. Over the last 8-10 years, the composition of our debt has changed. So where we had a lot of concessional loans, low interest, much better terms, we moved to a lot of commercial debt and in foreign currency. So as we said earlier, if the shilling, as it is now, is collapsing, it's going to cost us more to service that debt. The way I always look at this is, I look at my own household and say, well, and again, we said this earlier, what do I earn? What can I spend?
Right.
And most people will do that. Yes, it's a problem in some ways. Even if you look at online borrowing, there were some reports about Fuliza and things yesterday. It's huge how much money is being used that way. But that is a function of people struggling with high inflation, high prices, potentially lack of jobs as well, although there has been a slight uptick over the last 6-7 months. So we're in that catch-20. Does the government have money? Well, it doesn't have its own money. It's borrowing money. And then it's relying on tax revenue. And in a time when the economy is not doing brilliantly, tax revenue will not be where we want it to be.
What would...
I think we've got to give some kudos to KRA that in the first 7-8 months of this financial year, they've actually exceeded targets.
I hear what you're saying, and then I'm also, we're listening to finance and budget committees sitting down and having these conversations over the last, couple of days and then into next week. And we're saying, look, what would stop government today from seeing these things which are plain and clear as day to everybody else and saying, this is the situation which we have. Why can't decisions be made along the lines of the situation that is present? Because if anything, what we are saying now is that we're just going to go back into what has happened over the last 20 years, as Rama has said. We're not making any decisions that are going to make things better. They may be a little bit difficult in the short term, but the long run would be benefit in terms of what will happen economically for the country. But it seems as though, the committees will sit and we'll just make the same decisions that were being made before, and we're not making any headway. If anything, we're running into headwinds.
I totally agree with you. We are, and we've been doing it, as Rama said, for the last 20 years. We're not sitting back and thinking, well, what is good for the country in the long run? And as our debt has increased and our need to service it has increased, our decision making has become poorer, to my mind.
One prime example
we
of
need to address
that, if I may just interject, Nikhil, would be with respect to our policies on, say, fuel, for example. I mean, this on paper looks like a prime opportunity to essentially use the tax code to try and shift more of our transportation onto electric vehicles, onto electric bikes, onto electric buses. But there's absolutely nothing that's coming through in this budget that suggests that, hey, you know what? Here's what we're going to try and do to change our consumption patterns. Because you do that at one stroke. If you have a big percentage of your fleet, or say 20% of your fleet of motorbikes, vehicles, buses, whatever, running on electrons instead of fossil fuels, that has an immediate impact on your foreign exchange because you're not importing as much oil. That has an immediate impact on air quality. You're not burning as much fossil fuels. But our legislators and Treasury just seem to be sitting back and saying, yeah, well, business as usual.
We shall catch up when we catch up.
Yeah, Rwanda is doing it. Rwanda has a number of schemes that are moving to all electric bodabodas. I think electric buses as well. And it makes sense from the whether we accept climate change or not. It does make sense to do this, cleaner air, etc., etc. But when we introduce something that says, and we've got to do this phased. A few years ago, 2-3 years ago, we introduced excise duty or we reduced it on fully electric cars. And the question I had at the time was, great, this is a good idea, but how many people can afford a fully electric car? And where are we going to charge these cars? Because we don't have charging sites everywhere.
It's a chicken and egg question, isn't it? Because if you don't have, where do you start? Do you start by stimulating demand, or do you create conditions for that demand to exist?
Yeah, but maybe you start by giving a break on hybrid cars first, and then move to the fully electric. So again, it's a question of saying, well, where do I want to reach, and what policy do I have to put in place to get there?
It's a journey to get
there. And I don't
there.
think we're doing that. Yeah.
Nikhil, one final question. Just going back to what we were discussing earlier, looking at the situation in Sri Lanka and saying, can we borrow lessons from there? Look at how Sri Lanka ended up where it got here. Debt deficit is an issue. The food prices was an issue. Of course, the global pressures in the supply chain, shocks on forex earnings from tourism, from everything else. In this country, what is it that would get us to a point such as where Sri Lanka is?
Look, Sri Lanka was doing very well, in a sense, till pre-COVID. Its entire tourism industry took a complete hit when COVID came along. We went through the same. It's picking up now. What is saving this country, though, is that we have a diaspora that is committed to us. We get more money every month in USD from the diaspora than we do from our exports.
Yep.
And without them, we could very well be in a Sri Lanka type situation.
Wow.
So, yeah, God bless the diaspora.
Indeed. Nikhil, thank you very much for speaking to us this morning. Nikhil Hira is a tax expert. He's a partner with Cody Africa. We've been talking about the finance bill. How is the government going to finance the next budget? And what are these things that they're going to do? They're going to tax leg. Now they're coming for their entire head.
Kidneys.
The internals, everything.
You'll be left with hair and teeth.
Only hair and teeth. They've taken the entire head.
Oh, well.
Yeah, I have no hair, though.
Join the club.
More conversations coming up in the next hour. We talk about the launch of the expressway and the infrastructure projects and what that means. Is it costing us more? Is it of any great benefit to us? Keep it here. It's now 9 a.m.
Spice up your life. The latest news from around the world. 94.4 Spice FM.
Good morning. This is Newswire. Dennis Saseto. The case against Kenyan lawyer Bobby Sheila at International Criminal Court resumes next month. Both the prosecution and defense have been directed to file their closing briefs on 10th of June. According to the scheduling information provided by the court, closing statements will be held on June 27th during the morning sessions. Each party will be accorded 1 hour for their statement. The prosecution will present its statement first, followed by the defense. The Hague-based court concluded the hearing of Gisheru's case on March 29th when the office of the prosecutor filed a formal notice on the completion of its presentation of evidence. Gisheru, who is facing offences against the administration of justice consisting in corruptly influencing witnesses regarding cases from the situation in Kenya, pleaded not guilty when the trial opened in February. The last witness who testified against the lawyer claimed his life was in danger. Now, law students can now breathe a sigh of relief after the cabinet approved their proposal to decentralize the provision of the advocates training program. The new bill passed by cabinet will seek to address challenges occasioned by large numbers of students undertaking the mandatory postgraduate program only at the Kenya School of Law. Legal practitioners at the Kenya School of Law have called for the decentralization of the advocates training program, citing congestion at the school and the big number of courses for its students. The advocates training program is conducted in 18 months, 12 months in-house and 6 months pupillage. Teaching in the advocates training program is conducted on a clinical basis. Azimio la Umoja One Kenya presidential flag bearer Raila Odinga heads to Kwale County today as he continues to sell his agenda in the coastal region. Raila today is scheduled to first meet with party members before meeting with the Duruma community elders and finally addressing rallies in Movumbo and Ukunda. He was in Kilifi County yesterday, where he said that on his priority list for the locals is to strengthen the economy by building factories, assisting farmers and fishermen if elected president. Politicians from Laikipia County have been warned against holding night meetings that could breach peace in the region in this year's general election. Laikipia County Commissioner Joseph Kanyiri warned politicians against violating the law, noting they will be held accountable. He further called on the aspirants to preach peace in their campaign trail and not to cause chaos that could injure others. Mama Ida Odinga has advocated for women's safety in the country during the general election campaigns to protect female aspirants from gender-based violence. Speaking in Kisumu, Mama Ida said women folk have suffered a lot and their security should be at the forefront ahead of the August polls. She said that her heart was torn apart when she witnessed how women aspirants cried during party nominations due to violence meted on them. She pointed out that politics is a murky venture that is dominated by gender-based violence and sexual assault against female political hopefuls. And Kisumu County Assembly has signed a partnership agreement with the UK-based Westminster Foundation for Democracy for capacity building of the MCAs and staff of the Assembly. The initiative is part of the project dubbed the Kenya Devolution Program, which is funded by the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office. It aims to strengthen the capacity of the Assembly on financial management matters and the general oversight role. The project targets the budget, implementation, public investment accounts, as well as finance committees of the Assembly. And 5 students from AIC Malindi Boys High School in Kathonzoeni sub-county accused of attempting to burn a school dormitory were arraigned in Makueni Court. Appearing before Magistrate Elizabeth Kamei, the 5 accused pleaded not guilty to the charges. The court heard that the bedshed is suspected to have been used to sprinkle the students' dormitory floor with petrol with intent of torching the structure. The accused were arrested on May 10th and detained at Mavindini police station. And veteran Al Jazeera journalist Shireen Abu Akleh will be buried alongside her parents in a cemetery near Jerusalem Old City today, 2 days after she was shot dead in an Israeli army raid. The Palestinian American's body has been transferred from the occupied West Bank, and a funeral will be held at the Jerusalem church. Israel and Palestine have traded blame over the killing of Abu Akleh, a journalist with a Qatar-based Network's Arabic service, during clashes in the Jenin refugee camp. The United States, European Union and the United Nations have backed calls for a full investigation into what Al Jazeera labeled a deliberate killing in cold blood. But the Palestinian Authority has rejected holding a joint probe with Israel. This is Newswire. I'm Dennis Asseto. Good morning.
.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
Looking much better in most parts of the city today. Let's look outside of the city for a moment. Not much happening there. Looking east, going out towards Mombasa. That's all right, actually. In Mombasa town, not much going into the city, and out, not too terrible as well. Looking out west, and going out into Naivasha, out into Nakuru, and then through into Kisumu city. Not too bad this Friday. All right, back in the city of Nairobi, the Thika Superhighway traffic more or less has diminished. Just that nook at the Pangani underpass, and then coming in from Kiambu Road at Muthaiga Square, there's where you'll see the most of it this morning. We're also looking at Uhuru Highway getting into the city, everything feeding into that, into the CBD, coming off Ngong Road, coming off of Kamkunji and to Haile Selassie. That's where you see the most traffic this morning. We're likely to see this lose its power going into the morning, so it shouldn't be too bad. Going into mid-morning, traffic will definitely reduce. Let us know through the morning what's going on where you are. Let's check back in about half an hour and see how this may have changed. Let's talk on SpiceFM KE on Twitter. Text 40127.
This is the Situation Room, the home of hard-hitting political commentary and penetrating insights about the state of the nation. This is a talk radio experience like no other. The Situation Room, a place for hard truths, debates, and elevated conversations. The Situation Room, witty, political, engaging, deep, controversial. In the room, we have C.T. Muga, researcher, academic, seasoned political observer, a fountain of wisdom in these politically uncertain times. Ndu Okoh, Nigerian by birth, Kenyan by choice, communications expert, Pan-Africanist, a truth seeker and believer in people power, and Eric Latiff, agent provocateur, the man in the chair, seasoned journalist, news hound, a man who believes
7
in
minutes after
punching up,
9. How are
not
you
down.
doing? This is Kenya's
This
biggest
is the
conversation.
Situation.
We get into the final hour of the show this week until Monday. Our guest host, Roman Yang, is still here with us until the end of the show. We'll open up the phone lines now shortly to have more conversations about infrastructure and infrastructural expenditure in the last X number of years. But first, the day's proverb from CT.
Yes. You cannot feed your donkey only when you need to ride it.
You cannot feed your donkey only when you need to ride it. How would you draw parallels of that proverb with government of Kenya?
Look at our
people is equals donkey.
People is equals donkey.
Feed equals.
But if you think about it, it is political leaders is equals donkey. I'm going to explain why.
Explain.
You see, we seem to think that whenever political promises are made, especially at a season like the one we currently have, then that is supposed to be equal to the feeding. But I'm looking at it differently, and I'm saying that we have a situation where the person who is actually expecting to be fed is a politician because they're anticipating a vote. And because they want a vote, they are trying as much as they possibly can to offer as many promises as they can. Ostensibly, the understanding is that if you promise enough, and if you say enough, and if you badmouth the other person or the other party enough, then people will be pleased with you, and as a result, they will vote for you. This is what you need to survive. Now, I'm saying this. We don't need to ride this particular donkey, okay? This donkey is actually our property. And we have ensured that this particular donkey is actually well fed for whatever purposes.
It's actually a bit obese.
Yes, exactly. So when we ask the donkey to take us for a ride, it is our right to expect that ride because the donkey is well fed. And the donkey is fed in many, many ways than one. We even allow the donkey the space to seek pasture as they see fit. But we have a problem in that this particular donkey, when we now need to ride it, it doesn't allow us.
It doesn't want to be ridden.
And it is our right. That is how I would look at it.
It's our donkey.
It's our property.
And it does not want to.
Yes, it doesn't want to play its part. And yet we've played our part.
Punda imechoka imekataa.
Yes.
Hii si kuchoka.
Imeshiba.
Hii ni kushiba.
To the point where it actually forgets what its duties are. And it even forgets.
Telling you
No, it even forgets that you are the owner. It completely
Sitting there saying,
telling you to ride it to where?
That's classic Animal Farm, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yes.
The animal has become the Lord.
Yes.
Jesus. So, the expressway, this thing, tomorrow, according to, if, this is, the president said, we have to wait for it to happen.
If tomorrow never...
On Sunday, President Uhuru Kenyatta announced that starting Saturday, the 14th day of May, there will be a trial run on the expressway. Okay? Which basically means that it will be open. If you have the onboard unit, that's the prepaid electronic tax collection system, you'll be able to use it. If you've got the prepaid card, you'll be able to use it. If you don't have any, you want to go there and pay cash as you leave, you'll be able to use it. Nothing for free.
No, please.
They have said, trial does not mean free.
Even an hour.
Trial means let's try how much, how
it is you paying.
Let's try receiving your money.
It's not one of those subscriptions that you put your credit card and they say we only bill you after 7 days. No.
Yeah, no freelance.
No.
At a 14-day trial, blah, 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 blah,
But
blah.
we have your credit card details.
Yes.
No, please.
And you
But
can exit
you
at
call
any
yourself
point.
a taxpayer.
Yes. Nothing like that. Once it's launched, it's going to be how many years? 27 years of using the expressway, repaying the private investor who has put in money to put up the expressway. That is if we are lucky. It could extend. The details of the contract on this particular expressway, just like very many other things that the government is running, are not really clear. So, for example, what exactly did the government of Kenya sign up with the China Road and Bridge and airports and ports and what else have they done? They have built tunnels and expressway and all those things. This company, what are the details of this contract? Do we know, Rama?
No, we don't. A lot of those details have not even been made public. And the initial assumption was that, even the way it was being framed in very early stages, was that, but it's a straightforward thing. I mean, the Kenyan taxpayer is not going to bear any
upfront
cost. And on top of that, all the risk is on the contractor. I mean, it's. But here's the thing with a toll road, right? If people are going to be able to move from point A to point B, you cannot then, by implication, make the alternative, the quote-unquote free alternative, Mombasa Road as we know it, was to use as a way of, incentivizing people to use a toll road. Fundamentally, that's flawed. Two, there's an interesting court case, though, that might set a precedent that might help to illuminate what's going on. Last week, I believe, the Institute for Social Accountability and the Kenya Human Rights Commission basically sued Treasury and said, we need to have all the debt contracts and the related documentation for all of these debts that you have, from bilateral debts with China, France, the UK, Japan, to the multilateral ones, to anything from the syndicated loan side. This all needs to be made public. And the genesis of that was that they asked for this information under the Access to Information Act. Treasury was quiet.
Yep.
They then went to the Commission for Administration of Justice. CAJ asked Treasury, hey guys, you need to respond. Treasury was still quiet. Then they sued. So that's going to come up for mention, I believe, at the end of the month. That will be an interesting case to watch.
very many things and the risks here. Just like you said, initially we were told, the entire risk is being borne by the private developer. Okay? However, you will be paying the private developer. And there have got to be some conditions here. I of course, we don't know the details of this, but I have a feeling some of those details will include, some of those conditions would include, if the developer does not meet their revenue targets any year, then the National Treasury has got to fund the gap.
Yep. And there's a precedent for that, because you've seen that happening with the standard gauge rail line.
The SGR.
If Kenya Railways cannot be able to meet its debt payments, KPA, from what we can tell from their audit reports, will essentially have to step in and act as a sort of top-up for that particular facility, which in itself raises questions. If the forecast that you made when this money was lent was that Kenya Railways can make money by itself, why do you need KPA as a guarantor?
Yep.
1. 2, in those feasibility studies that were done, what was the point of having the railway development levy in place to essentially act as a facility that would pay off debts?
Yep.
And then you turn around and KPA needs to be a guarantor. You're raiding 100
pipeline as well, in a way, because now they are under one management.
Yeah. And then you're taking 18 billion shillings out of the petroleum development levy to pay bills for the SGR. Clearly, there's a fundamental problem with the math there. The forecasts were completely out of whack.
That's why I call it a Potemkin village.
It's a sham.
It's a sham. It's something you are told this wonderful gleaming story that's supposed to represent the truth, and it is not the truth. It's just a facade.
Yeah.
What is being done is not what you're being told. They know full well what they're doing. They know full well what they hope to achieve by it, but this is what you're told. This is for you to consume. And the moment you are told you need not worry, you will not pay. Anytime this government tells you that, set up right, okay, back lane, because you are most certainly going to pay through your teeth.
Indeed.
Yes.
And the reasons why this information is not going to be made public. You can throw as many court cases as you want at it. The truth of the matter here is that they are reluctant to tell you the details of the contract, because they will have to then reveal numbers. They will also have to reveal whom.
Beneficial ownership.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Whom is here, that you might be very surprised that actually who is turning the wheels here. And that information, they don't want it to get out. So when why would somebody hide it? Just think about it in the natural way of doing things. What is the fundamental reason why anybody hides anything? They don't want it to come to light. They don't want you to know exactly who is running this machine. If they did, people would not be going to court to ask them to stop or to reveal. People would not be asking questions about why is this happening, the manner in which it's happening. You wouldn't be asking questions about where would a particular levy go if this was actually the case. You wouldn't be asking those questions, because if that information was being made pop and plain as day, you wouldn't have to be suspicious or ask the question. There's a reason why people hide things, because they don't want it to come to light.
The thing I'm slightly surprised by, and maybe this is just me being a little politically naive, is in an environment where economic conditions are this dire and they're getting worse, when you've had an administration that has literally been running from one own goal to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next. I'm curious as to why this hasn't been weaponized as a campaign issue. Not yet. I mean, if you're going to come in and say, as whatever candidate is coming in next in, and you say, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to chop taxes by X amount of money, right? I'm going to take your top income tax rate down from 30%. I'm going to take it down to 25%. I'll keep it there for the duration of my term. I'll chop VAT down to from 18 to 16% or 16 to 14%, whatever the number is. And when I come in, here are the things we're going to deal with: debt. All these contracts you guys are talking about, they're going to be made public. We'll figure out who the beneficial owners are. They look like quick, easy wins, but I'm still slightly puzzled as to why it's just not happening.
Because everybody who's campaigning
has a finger in the pie.
Vested interest. Everybody has vested interest.
How would you expose yourself?
Well, I mean, if you're going to expose the other guy, the argument here would be that it's mutually assured destruction to some extent.
Yeah.
if I am going to essentially get into this, it's a battle of attrition. The assumption would be that my side could win, could weather the storm better than the opposition.
But you see, there's also the believability factor. Even if you pointed out this issue against the backdrop of the many wild promises that politicians make, it'll be just one other promise.
There'll be a story.
Yes, and then they'll be saying, they've said what exact? And they'll say, okay, just pause for a second. Hold on. This current government told us these things, and the things they told us, and there were many. There were so many you can even remember them.
Yes.
And they even came and reiterated and gave us timelines.
5 stadiums.
Yes. So, you think, what's this person saying again? It is very likely politically for you to be associated with those storytellers. So you'd rather just even keep quiet. In addition to the element of self-interest coming in, you realize this may actually not serve your interest. Because anything that has to do with the good that you might do is associated with promises that have been made but were never kept.
But okay, let me slightly push back a bit here. You can have, and even assuming, because all societies are corrupt. Doesn't matter where you look at
Absolutely.
it. All societies are corrupt. There's always going to be an element of corruption that comes into play.
Corruption is a human thing, but carry on. Yes.
But here's the basic idea. It is better to have the ability to siphon 10% of a large pie, a pie that exists, that is, to go back to your example, 10% of a functional punda than 100% of a dead one. And unfortunately, where we are now, incomes are going down, inflation is battering people's ability to work, to create jobs, to invest. That punda is basically 70% dead.
You are trying to not just equate, but you want to assume a certain level of understanding and intellect on people who don't have it. Yes, because if they had it, we would have seen it by now. Their actions would have spoken loudly.
Something better.
Yeah, we keep having this debate, and I've been forced to understand that, sometimes you're asking somebody to do something they can't do, okay? This scenario that you present is a scenario that you could actually say put into practice in the counties. You'd say, if this money that the counties received was used in such a way, the economies of the counties would grow. So, if we are given to storytelling and looking at practicality and say, okay, your job is to siphon, you'd be siphoning maybe 5%, but it would be a lot more than if you simply take the money that is given to the county and directly siphon it. Now, you would assume that somebody would understand that.
City, let me present an even worse scenario to
Please
you,
do.
and I've said it before. That there is actually understanding and comprehension of these things that we are talking about. The folks that we are talking to or dealing with here are not idiots. There actually is understanding and comprehension. They know. What makes it worse is that there is knowledge of this thing, but you choose not to. And for me, it is fundamentally worse. You choose not to do something.
The problem is morality.
Yes.
You see what you're talking
making a
about here,
choice.
Rama? You are being moral about it. Okay, I'm going to steal from you, but I'm going to steal in a better way. So I'll make sure that you have something as I take.
Self-interest.
Yes.
You want to keep, it's like a tick, right? I want to keep my host alive.
Exactly.
I don't want it dead.
No, because if it
The
dies,
Kenyan
then
politician.
essentially so do I.
Yeah.
The Kenyan politician does not. He thinks about, okay, so today we are milking the cow dead. Tomorrow we'll go to the goat.
It'll be something else.
Now, folks, the
They're
examples
actually
you're
thinking
giving,
about it tomorrow.
the examples you're giving, where is this knowledge that you're speaking of?
CT, you mean to tell
you
me
are
that
giving
if these
descriptions
fellas,
of
if
a
these
complete
fellas,
absence of knowledge.
CT, if these people decided that they were going to sit around said table and make these decisions that Nikhil has given us today, that examples of which he's given us today, examples that Elijah has given us today, you mean to tell me that if they sat around those tables and said, guys, this is the direction in which we ought to go, that they could not beat this thing out in a matter of days? They could, and that's what I'm saying, that they make a decision in the opposite. Not that they don't understand. You have said on many occasions, CT, about how the National Assembly that we have today is one of the most educated that we've ever had.
Academically so.
Academically so. But the assumption also is that you then apply the academics to real life, and that you can be able to do it. That you can be able to do that. And I am saying there is something fundamentally wrong with a leadership that chooses, because it's a matter of choice here, chooses not to do something about a situation because you're protecting your own selfish interests.
You're being generous. You're actually being generous because, I mean, this isn't a quacking like a duck and having webbed feet situation, all right? Consistently, you're talking about budgeting processes. Consistently, you're talking about matters that come before Parliament and relevant committees that should be set. Consistently. And yes, choices are made. But I am saying the ability to do what is purpose and what we feel should be done isn't there. Because if it was there, then we would see it. That's really all I'm saying. I'm not going to continue assuming ability on people who consistently show me an absence of that ability. I cannot.
What you're seeing is not lack of ability. It's a lack of willingness.
And
it's
that's
a lack
what
of
makes
that
it worse.
value.
And what do you think ability is?
Look at these guys. This is somebody who has looked at, okay, so what's the best way to actually directly benefit from taxpayers? PPP. What do I need to facilitate PPP so that it works for me? A law, amend the law here, put it in policy. It's there in law. Okay?
And then set up a shell company to take advantage of it.
Yes. Some forward-thinking city. We are done with cooling local. So what we are going to do is we bring in foreign and make it local and cool it.
They use that ability somehow becomes present in another scenario. Yesterday we talked about the cleaner. Let me just give you an example. Let's not even go to the National Assembly. We talked about the cleaner in the prison system, and you said, CT, said this guy is brilliant. I don't even understand why the government is not using the ingenuity of this man to be able to sort out other things in government. A cleaner was able to work out a web of how he was going to siphon money from the system, and did it so brilliantly so that he was operating as though he was a millionaire, but still accepting his 20,800 shillings every month.
I like your example.
How is it that you can apply this genius for your selfish interest? So it's not a matter of you don't know what to do or you don't know how to do it. You can do it when it applies to you as an individual or with your posse of crooks. But you can't do it for the benefit of the country at large.
Why there's a subject of wonder in this case is because we seem to equate someone's position and job description to their full capacity or the entirety of their capacity. By the same token, because someone is well educated, has many degrees, and has a lofty position of an MP, we then assume that they will be able to do certain things. And you see, my point is, the assumptions are wrong.
I'm saying the crookability, is that a word? I'm saying the crookability.
We can make it a word.
We can make it a word for the purposes of this. The crookability index increases. Look at the positions in which they are in, and that's what I'm saying to you today, CT. That they know what it is that they're supposed to do. In fact, if you want to get religious, the Bible calls it a sin. You know what you're supposed to do, and you choose not to do it. In the olden days, they hang you up and draw and quarter you.
But then, this is what I'm trying to say. If you know what you're supposed to do and then you don't do it,
it doesn't mean you're dumb.
No, but it means you don't have the ability. I know you'll say he has the ability, but they're making choices. That's precisely the point. If the choice is before you and you make a certain decision based on what is before you, you are displaying your ability. That's what I'm saying. You're telling us
your criminality.
You're telling us with great clarity, this is the sum total of who and what I am.
Ultimately, it's a very fast way of essentially driving the country off a cliff. Because if we take your argument to its logical conclusion, it implies that next parliament might be, again, full of educated individuals who make the same set of deeply questionable fiscal choices. At the end of the day, because the constraint here is, where's the money going to come from? At the end of the day, international investors, international creditors will get to a point where they'll say, you know what? No.
Forget it.
You're not lending.
We're not doing this anymore.
I mean, you're already starting to see a pullback with Chinese debt. Right? Chinese lending has basically dried up. The amount of fresh loans that we used to have 2010, you have these big FOCAC summits and, $60 billion in credit lines.
And it's not because their pot is running dry.
It's not, they don't have money. They're just like,
But I'm of a different view. The Chinese have achieved their goal. They what do they need to lend us more money for?
There is a massive infrastructure deficit.
Yes, precisely.
Across the entire continent.
Precisely.
You do not have a lack of places to put money and get a return for
business.
Yes, but I'm trying to say
that they are not in this for business.
Oh, no, they are. But it's when you're a world power, what did I say? You talk about spheres of influence. How do you do it?
But even
economically,
but even then, China has been what? Biggest single trading partner for many African economies since like 2012, 2013.
Yes. No,
By
even before then, yes.
Yeah, but by definition, right? Even just by trade, forget even the debt question, just by trade. If you just do a simple audit among all the things that we have here, this, our phones, these laptops, these monitors, likely these mic arms as well, a lot of these things are manufactured in China, right? By definition, these guys are already entrenched, not just in Africa, across many supply chains.
No, they are entrenched in the world. And the West made it possible for them because they made them the manufacturer of the world.
Well, if you open the door and we walk through it.
Yes, precisely. So what am I saying? You see, my point is simply this. These are people who have long-term goals and they understand it. The West were caught napping with their structural adjustment programs, the head boy and prefect mentality about everything that happens in African countries. The Chinese came and did away with all that and opened the doors. Now, any smart businessman will know, okay, I think I am where I wanted to be. Right now, let's see how we can go about.
So they're holding back. This is them
in my view,
raising their leverage.
Yes, in my view.
Strongly disagree.
Yes.
Because if you're that's like Steve Jobs saying, yeah, I've come back to Apple. It's now a profitable company. I'm not going to bother with
I've captured the market.
Yeah, I'm not going to bother with the iPod. I'm not going to bother with iTunes.
But you see, it's a different scenario because when you owe money, because we owe money, there are many avenues that the lender still has. You still owe money. You're still going to have to pay. All they're saying is that the conversations for us to do business is going to have to change drastically. This is what we did before. So the only way I send that message home, in my view, is I stop giving you money.
I see what you're saying, Siri, and actually, I think I agree.
Yes.
This is just part of the negotiation. It's part of the long game.
Yes.
When I came to you, I presented myself this way.
Yes.
And we had, these nice conversations where you'd knock on my door. Hey, come in. Oh, Rama, Sasa, what do you want today? There's samosa, there's sausage, there's blah, 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 this and the other. All right. So you come in. What are you looking for? Yeah, it's okay. Don't worry. You want 7 billion? Yeah, take.
Fully as much as you want.
It's okay. You go. Then I get you to a point where now you're dependent. Now, for me to change that conversation, for you to realize that you'll not be knocking on my door and just coming the way you want to come and kulaing my samosas and then walking away with the fuliza, I have got to introduce a watchman at the gate. Nimekuja kuona wacha nimuulize kama ako ndani.
You know the flip side of it is when you'll hear this often, especially in investment banking circles. When you owe the bank $1 million, right? That's your problem. When you owe the bank $1 billion, that's a very different conversation. Now the bank has to make sure you're still alive. And to some extent, it does get to a point where I do feel that we as African economies, we're simply not exercising our agency at all. That we've simply decided to accept that this is how things have always run. These are the structures we found ourselves in, and we'll just, work within them and just blindly accept that, yeah, well, okay, fine. So the debt terms were ridiculous, but we'll just work with them. We'll impose those costs on taxpayers. We'll impose those costs on higher taxes, right? Even though incomes have diminished, which is fantastically flawed. What is it that stops finance ministers across the board from simply saying, look, guys, we have a problem here. Our economy is in trouble. So collectively, we all need to come to the table, right? And if that means that we have to do a selective default, sorry, it's going to happen. Deal with it. Because at that point, you're the $1 billion. The creditors have to come to the table.
They don't see that. Our leaders don't see that. Let's take a break. 27 minutes to 10. We're asking you the question on our social media this morning. If you were given an opportunity to trade in your Samsung phone, which new Samsung A series model would you choose? Is it the A33 or the A53 or the A73, and why? Post your response on our comments on Twitter and Facebook. And Nyambura, our social media manager, will pick 2 winners today. We'll walk away with a beautiful hamper from Samsung. If you were given the opportunity to trade in your Samsung phone, which Samsung new model would you choose? Is it the A33, the A53, or the A73? And why? And by the way, Samsung is giving you that opportunity to do exactly that. Trade in your Samsung phone and you can walk away with that phone. 26 to 10, time for weather and traffic.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
No, you know, this wheelbarrow, how can you give people wheelbarrow? His party symbol is an umbrella. Is he distributing umbrellas in McQueen?
Have you been told if we don't lock between 10 to 4, this is what we're saving?
You try and call them, the same person who was in your house every day, because they know you are influential and you will give them votes. Call them after 1 month and see if they'll pick up their phone.
Don't tell your member of parliament that you want him to come and build a school, you want him to come and do a hospital. That is not the work of the member. Now that we have devolution in this country, resources should go to those devolved units.
You have to have strong, independent institutions. And I mean, you have to have police who has the right to take the biggest town in the country and question, why did you do this and that, and send them to court if necessary.
Joel in Kericho, good morning.
Salama sana, habari ya asubuhi.
Salama kabisa. Mbunge wako ni nani?
Anaitwa Seriousness Martin, hapa ni Ainamoi.
Seriousness Martin, Ainamoi.
Yes. Sasa ile juma nampia hii nini? Amalize aende. Asante sana.
That's it. Sunny conditions in Nairobi, highs of 20 and actually highs of 25 and lows of 17 going into the weekend. It's sunny at 19 in Nakuru, highs of 26 and lows of 15. We'll see 15 as the low in a partly sunny Nyeri as well, going to highs of 24. 19 and sunny in Eldoret, highs of 26 and lows of 13. It's raining now in Mombasa at 28, highs of 31, and it's also a wet day in Malindi at 30. We'll see highs of 31. And lows of 27. Mostly cloudy conditions at 24 in Kisumu, highs of 29. And we'll see highs of 28 in Kakamega, where it's mostly cloudy at 24. All right, so rain is coming down in Kampala at 23, highs of 26 and lows of 19, while the sun is out in Dar es Salaam at 27, highs of 31 and lows of 24. We're looking at sunny conditions at 16 in Joburg, highs of 22 and lows of 11, while it's partly sunny at 26 in Lagos with highs of 32 and lows of 26. Let's look out into Beijing. We're going into early evening Friday. It's 23 and sunny. We'll see highs of 24 and sunny conditions at 12 in Paris, highs of 22. 22 will also be the high in London, where it's sunny at 12. And rounding things out in New York, the Big Apple will coming into Friday, 15 degrees and cloudy, highs of 21 and lows of 14. Traffic situation just a little bit better on the Thika Superhighway. Coming in, we're seeing traffic ebbing and flowing. I'd like to see that diminish in a few short minutes. Coming off Kiambu Road, also there's some action there as well. Mombasa Road flowing really well today. Getting out into the city will not be a sore spot for you. Let's look at Westlands. A lot of folks then using the Red Hill Link Road to get out of the mess that is Waiyaki Way. And shouldn't be much of a problem thereafter. All right, where else are we seeing it tickling? Oh, on Jogo Road, in and outbound traffic getting to that City Stadium roundabout, and Lusaka Road is giving it off as you then connect with Langata Road eventually. So looking at slow movement there. We should be out of traffic hour a little bit later than usual today, but let's keep an eye on things through the morning. Talk to us, SpiceFM KE on Twitter, text 40127.
Business News with SpiceFM.
I'm Dennis Aseto. The private sector is calling on the government to consider reviewing taxes after 2 years as opposed to the annual increment to help them plan better their operations and reduce price fluctuations. According to the Kenya Private Sector Alliance, frequent price changes have seen imports outsell Kenyan products in the local market. Last year, the manufacturing sector was one of the key economic drivers, registering a 15.9% growth. Safaricom's net earnings, excluding Ethiopia, rebounded to pre-COVID-19 levels to register a 1% 0.4% growth year-on-year to 69.6 billion shillings. However, net profit including Ethiopia dropped by 1.7% to 67.5 billion shillings. Safaricom CEO Peter Ndegwa attributed the net loss registered in Ethiopia to the market conditions, but expects the firm's interest in Ethiopia to break even by year 4 of operation. Mara has raised 2.7 billion shillings to build a pan-African cryptocurrency exchange platform to include a crypto wallet. This launch of Mara comes on the backdrop of funding from various companies. While announcing the launch, Mara co-founder and Chief Executive Officer Shin Nade said the firm has also partnered with the Central African Republic, which just passed a bill legalizing Bitcoin as legal tender. Kenya Power has started installing smart electricity meters to its customers to curb their rampant illegal connections experienced across the country. According to Barnabas Muli, KPLC's county manager for Nairobi South, the company has been losing over 700,000 units a month. With the smart meters, the manager explained that the company will be able to keep tabs with its consumers and keep clear records of their clients' electricity consumption. The smart meters are linked directly to KPLC's systems and can be controlled remotely if the customer fails to clear the bills. The smart meters are installed at the electricity pole, which makes it impossible for anyone to tamper with a connection. For Spice Business, I'm Dennis Aseto.
Spice FM Business.
Twenty to 10. The conversation continues as we conclude the show this morning. We're talking about the expressway. So from tomorrow, if we go by the president's announcement, expressway starts being used. Whatever they want to call it, trial basis before the president comes to cut the ribbon or whatever he wants to do. But expressway starts being used. Does that mean that the project is complete?
Of course not.
I mean,
Because
the lower road is a mess.
If you look at what they are doing now on the lower road, they've started now redoing the lanes. Okay? So they're marking.
Can you be very clear what you mean by redoing the lanes?
They're marking the lanes. That means that there's no more work that's going to happen on that section of the road.
Eric,
marking the lane
look at
means
the sides
that.
look at the sides of the road. The earth that was moved that is still there. I mean, there is so much that isn't done. There's the state of the road before they started building the expressway was one thing. It was messed up. It was interfered with. Now, before all that is brought back to its factory settings, are we going to say that the project is complete? Because it's not the road, it's the project.
Because the question then will become, okay, how do you hold these contractors to account? Because the part of the problem here is that, and you see it all along Mombasa Road, you see this on the contractor who's working on the A104 from James Gishuru all the way up to Roni, and it is an absolute mess. The road is not properly lit, signage is virtually nowhere to be found, and when they decide to essentially put in all these diversions, you'll literally wake up one day and a section of the road is closed off.
Yep.
You have no idea where to turn.
You don't know where to go.
Signage has not been put in properly. There's a certain amount of incompetence, deliberate incompetence that is on full display. And these contractors and our roads agencies, Kenha and so on, they're essentially sitting there not doing their jobs.
I actually keep pointing it out here that the Kenya National Highways Authority, there's something they're consuming there. What's that road office called? Barbara Road.
Which one?
Their headquarters. Barbara building, Barbara house, right? There's something that's being
There's
served
something
there.
in the air, man.
The edibles
In
and
the water.
whatever is they're smoking. It's completely something you can't explain. Look at this road. We've been talking about the expressway. Because the road owner is Kenha. They've given a contract to CRBCCCCC to do the road.
C to the power 4.
Yes. Look at what they're doing. They haven't restored the lower road. The section that you're talking about from ABC Place to Rironi.
It's a mess.
Complete nightmare.
In fact, driving there at night, this week alone, I've seen incidents where, because it's my daily commute, go up the road and there are incidents where people have smacked into these random concrete barriers.
Yes.
And what they do as the contractor is literally they'll put in these barriers because they're diverting traffic along some sections, and then they slap on literally like 4 inches of reflective tape. And it's
you only see it when you're in it.
It's not even 4 inches. That thing is microscopic.
That thing is supposed to be reflective, but it's only red.
It's a mess. You can't see it because, and the fact is, look at the conditions we're in. it's been raining for a couple of weeks. Cars come up, they kick up road spray, they kick up mud. Literally, you will slap on that tape today, in like 3 or 4 hours, it's going to be completely invisible. They come in and they do the same thing again. It's incompetent. Like, even signage, just to tell, because if you're not a regular road user, how will you know where to turn off?
Exactly.
Because you're just going to be diverted to one side of the road, and the next thing you know, you've got a whole bunch of blinding headlights coming your way.
And you have no idea whether you're on the right side or the wrong side. You have no clue where to go.
Let's look at what they did. They literally dug up the road that was being used from end to end because they wanted to, remove pipe that they didn't want to destroy. They wanted to remove electricity lines. They wanted to remove fiber lines that would allow them to redesign this road, essentially, and then, put them back. Now, they put back whatever they had removed, but they didn't now return the road to what it was in terms of a usable road. And so now here we have huge sections of just massive road. It's not been properly demarcated. Some parts it's smooth, other parts it's rough. You have mountains of soil that are on the side of the road going in both directions. And the question is, when will this ever be restored? You have the concrete slabs that you're talking about that were used then for diversions before, and they've been left there. You have where they've dug up for these electricity lines that they're not bothered to resurface or recarpet the road. Even in the instances where they have recarpeted the road, it's not been made smooth. And this is the issue where, look, let's be honest, this is the issue where on Gong Road, people died because of this same issue. Because the road was not smoothened in the manner in which it ought to have been. And so you find yourself going in an incline and then you're now descending. And before you know it, you're over the bridge.
And into a ditch.
This is it. This is exactly what is going to happen. Let's just name how many areas can we name? Mlolongo, it's going to happen there. On the turnoff just after Syokimau, it's going to happen. Here on Mombasa Road, just after Chloride XL, it is going to happen. Unless they do something about it and we are not aware. But it seems very likely to me that they're going to leave this road in the current state in which it is. So are you then forcing people? So then is it by design? Are you forcing people to go up?
The government only responds to pressure. So the fundamental question is, what kind of pressure can we apply to get things fixed?
Absolutely.
Is it a question of literally essentially going to court and suing the living daylights, essentially putting together a class action suit against Kenha and saying you are essentially in breach of your fiduciary duty to Kenyan taxpayers and you need to fix this? And it's not just liability to Kenha, personal liability
to the individuals,
to managers as well. Because you can't be there getting money from taxpayers. And your job is to essentially make sure these projects are implemented properly. And then we end up with this mess.
And how many things are we going to look at, for example? For the majority of your road users in this, let's just take Nairobi, in this city, they're using public transport. Look at the section between Bellevue and Cabanas. Look at what they've done in terms of the different bus stages that were then available, and they've
destroyed the bus stages.
They've destroyed the bus stages.
There's no pedestrian walkway.
Pedestrian walkways don't exist.
There's no pedestrian footpath to cross. So if you work at DTB, for example, you work at Diamond Trust,
you get off here,
and you're coming from town, you alight at say Airtel.
You alight at Airtel.
How do you go to Diamond Trust Bank across the road?
It would be the same thing as if you alighted at General Motors, because then you have to cross and then walk the whole distance back. So who took them into consideration?
No one.
Who took the people who work at night into consideration, where there's no lighting that has been restored? The lighting that used to exist between the Panari Sky Center and here was all removed. Was it put back?
No.
It doesn't exist.
And what they then do in the name of, no, we just need to make you guys slow down. In fact, actually, the tendency tends to be to blame drivers. No, we need to make you guys slow down. So what do? Rumble strips and bumps. That's our go-to solution for everything. Instead of just proper design where you have pedestrian traffic and you have vehicular traffic. Please don't mix the two. Just build the damn footbridges.
Rama, the design has all those wonderful things that you speak of. They tend to. However,
execution.
It's not even execution. There's a magic trick that is applied in these situations. One moment you have this thing on paper, then when you go to the ground, as we say, they've disappeared.
Ground bit only different.
Yes, exactly.
It's the stuff of Houdini.
Mombasa Road is it's a death trap already.
Yes, it is.
And we know it, the way it's just being done. Yesterday, the Principal Secretary for Infrastructure, Professor Paul Maringa, was inspecting because, ahead of the
Ahead of
official
tomorrow.
launch of Expressway, he was out there with only a day to go before the Nairobi Expressway is open. Infrastructure PS Professor Paul Maringa on an inspection tour of the project, accompanied by a team of engineers. Engineers, not a team of
Solution-oriented
sweepers,
folks.
engineers from Kenya and other stakeholders. And they've even Moja Express, that's going to be operating the expressway, put up that thing on their Twitter. There is the PS. Okay? The PS went back to his office, satisfied that we are ready.
It's good.
That's what I was talking about, the contract. Is it possible that part of the contract says that you shall not have a competing road that will remove the revenues from
Is
this
that not what I
expressway?
said? Was it, or are we looking at a situation where it was originally designed to force people to go up? Make sure that this expressway was the star attraction, or it was designed for it to be that way. Leave this mess down here. So what you're going to do is force people to go up. Was it in the
If
design?
we all go up, it won't be an expressway. That's the whole point.
It's market manipulation.
Yeah, you're forcing people to use it.
If we all use it, let me repeat, it will not be an expressway.
Yeah, it ceases being an expressway.
It completely, its capacity is infinitely less than what we are currently using.
I've heard that there are conversations that they'll also allow matatus to ply the expressway.
Oh boy.
Hey, wait, finished. So,
You'll just pay double if you're a matatu and getting onto the expressway. But
Matatus,
you know what that
matatus,
means?
they just stop anywhere.
but
Those
you know what
ones.
that means?
But if they stop anywhere, where will the passengers
Where will
alight
the
and go?
passengers alight and go to?
It's matatus. You will. These guys will pull miracles out of
You see
nowhere.
the exit of to the toll gate.
Yes.
All right. So it's at Capital Center. Matatu stops up there. Shuka Teremuka.
Yeah, you
Na
walk.
ramp.
You walk.
You walk. Sort yourself out.
Shuka Teremka. Unaenda South Sea. Shuka hapa Teremka.
Yeah,
No.
or even
Find your way.
the what where it ends on the James Gishuru side, because that used to be quote unquote a
bus stop.
a bus stop. Because now guys will just be like, well, see, we are here.
Well,
We
Shukisha.
stopped. You shook over
The
there.
other thing is what they've done to the bus stops. The Westlands bus terminus is no longer
no
there.
longer there.
All right. Remember, this was a project that was put up. So this is a bus terminal, the bus stop. So all the matatus that go up towards Kangemi and up,
Stop there.
they would stop there. It no longer exists. Coming down at the mall, Westlands, there's
The
no
toll
stage.
station.
It's now an
It was
entry to a
removed.
toll station.
Yes.
So matatus are actually stopping there, but they're blocking the entrance to the toll station.
Yes, they
There
are.
will be a clash once the police are deployed to make sure that people are
not
using.
there. And I
the
think you
toll.
have to ask a deeper question here. When you're looking at development infrastructure, is it supposed to be to the detriment of the people who are the ones essentially who are going to pay for this thing?
But it was clearly not designed for them.
It was not designed for them. That's
In
what I'm
practice,
saying.
it clearly wasn't designed for them.
It is not
Because
designed for them.
If you, what would be sensible here would be to essentially develop something, design something that works with
Cross-board.
public transport, with pedestrian traffic, because that is how the bulk of us move around.
Yes.
This assumption that, what this road design basically tells us is that we're saying we're only designing for, and I keep forgetting what the exact number is from IEA, we're only designing for the 9 or 10% of Kenyans who actually use cars on a regular basis, which is complete nonsense.
So the rest of you can go to Blazes, essentially, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We
well-
all walk.
Yeah.
So if you walk, you fly.
Walk on what? Which
Not even-
sidewalks?
No, you see, you're even
Which
considering-
sidewalks to
you're
begin
even
with?
considering what they should do.
Start
There's
flying.
no consideration here in terms
They
of what's
don't
going to
care.
happen. No.
When you had the bosses from Kenya here, remember I also asked them, there are people who, you're a mama mboga in South B. Okay, you go to Marikiti early in the morning, you buy your goods, and then you give them to this mkokoteni pusher. And you tell them, bring my goods to South B. During this construction, the mkokoteni guy was just told you, figure yourself out. You no longer exist. And then the Kenya chair was saying, you know what, we need to move into a place where we no longer have mkokoteni pushers on the road because...
But the realities are there.
They're there. Today, like if we repeat that issue, you are a lighter matatu anywhere on this section and you need to cross over to the other side. If you're not at Bellevue where there is a footbridge, if you're not at General Motors where there's a footbridge, where is the other one? Imara Daima. In between, you figure
You
yourself
walk
out. Okay?
or whatever. Figure it out. And any
You
kind
work at Eka, you find
and
out.
you're on this side of the road. well, that's your business. Any kind of infrastructure development that does not take into consideration the options that the general population need to operate, need to succeed, need to thrive, then one can go as far as saying that it's not worth it.
And you wonder why every once in a while you come across an individual who works for Kenha or Kera in the spotlight with the Asset Recovery Agency and Ethics and Anti-Corruption. And you suddenly find this person owns a lot more than they can actually explain. So someone tells you a long, tall story about the investment abilities and the genius capacity they have for turning 240,000 shillings a month into a multi-million shilling empire.
I started this chicken business with one feather.
One feather. And now I even have chicken feet and claws. So, I mean, I'm telling you magic.
No, Houdini.
Maybe some of these things are designed that way. Look at the example of Thika Road. So first do Thika Road, erect bumps. Then say, what we need is to remove these bumps and put foot bridges. Separate contract. Let's do another major contract so that you expand Outer Ring Road into dual carriageway, feeding into Thika Road. Get to Thika Road and you leave it into a one lane. Years later, so now the Outer Ring Road into Thika Road is creating a bottleneck. Fresh contract, create an interchange.
But case in point, let's look at Ngong Road. How many contractors?
How many? Don't even know.
We don't know now.
Is it 3? Is it 4?
We're not sure
and
yet.
What's a stretch? How many kilometers is it? You see,
we talked about it's about 18
kilometers.
kilometers.
Yes, exactly.
18 kilometers.
Exactly.
Yes, and there was one contractor that was
There's
given 11.1 kilometers. Another one was given some 7.9
Another one has been given, yes. So even the quality of the road, there'll be some difference.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's not a long distance, okay? And then, we forget the element of the team that started off at some point, move out, move on, do this and the other. A new team comes in. So what you're saying, very true. And the conversation, if I may take the liberty of thinking is, these people, so-and-so ate.
Yes, no.
How then can we eat? Yes, we know the road is complete, but how can we complete it further? Okay?
How can we smoothen grandma's patchwork quilt? Because that's what it looks like when you have these different contractors. So, it's just patchwork.
You see,
now we need somebody to come and...
It's a sad conversation, but it explains the situation we have in this country. It explains why it is we are paying for things that are not what was designed. We're actually not paying for what we were supposed to have been given. And it cuts across everything we have in our country.
But you guys, on a serious note,
this time, to go serious.
No, seriously speaking. This thing, the lower road here, we should be, unless they do something about it, let's just be ready
the A8
for
is
many
a killer.
Casualties.
Last weekend, we witnessed
an
accident right here at the Total petrol station opposite DTB.
Yes.
Right? Someone driving on the A8 and that whole huge curve because you have to create room and space for the toll station. And then they rammed into the expressway.
Yes.
Through the chicken mesh.
Yes.
Through the guardrail. Onto the expressway. That's just one.
One.
It's the beginning.
Because of that uneven road there that they did not bother to
have no
smooth
clue where
it.
you
You're
are.
not sure where you're going to have to come back and look for some kind of control when you're coming back onto the road. Because of of space that was made for the toll station, this entire road is uneven. So I was talking about no demarcation, no nothing, no smoothing of the road, nothing.
Actually,
How
there's
many
no
more are going to
demarcation.
happen?
You're not really sure whether you're
You're not
driving
sure
in the
whether
middle of the
you're
road,
going
the
towards
side of the road.
Olesereni
You're not really sure.
You don't know where you are.
No, you don't.
And on top of that, speaking of costs, Kenha as an agency, these are their last audited numbers. They got an opinion on from the Auditor General. There's a whole bunch of projects that clearly are delayed, 100%. And then on top of that, so for example, the expansion, the upgrade of the road from James Gishuru all the way to Rironi, that should have been finished in August 2020.
Oh, it's complete. What we see there is...
Oh, that's completed road. That's amazing.
Amazing stuff. Miracles should have been happening. There's accrued interest that we're essentially going to pay for because Kenya essentially is funded by our taxes.
Yep.
These guys, for the year under review alone, so this is a fiscal year ending in June 2021, 171 million shillings just in interest.
In interest.
On delayed payments. So we're not even talking about the payments themselves that are delayed.
But you know, what you began by saying earlier on,
Let's conclude,
Rama.
City. Let's just say this one.
Let's go
We shall
and pray.
continue.
Maybe Sunday is coming.
I think Tuombe too.
Let's reward Stephen Odhiambo, who says that they'd go for the Samsung A33. It'll be an upgrade from the Samsung A12 that I'm currently using. It's got nice memory, better storage capacity, and amazing camera to capture memorable moments, not to mention affordability. And then the other person that we want to reward is Kevin Okoh. So Stephen Odhiambo and Kevin Okoh. Kevin says the A73 all the way. I'm currently using an A72 and loving it. The camera has great features. The fun option, the great way to spend time with my daughters, great processing speeds as I work on multiple tabs and apps, great experience overall. Grace guessing the A73 would top it. Yes, indeed it would. You win a hamper each from Samsung. Thank you very much for tuning in. Rama, thank you for coming today.
Asante sana for having me. This has been fun.
Indeed.
Yeah, so you'll come again next weekend.
Tongeni my attendance.
Have a lovely weekend, folks. We'll see you back on Monday. It's now 10 o'clock.
Spice up your life. The latest news from around the world.